Chapter 192. His Majesty's verbal decree. The genie guards acted recklessly and attracted the displeasure of the mercenaries, so they should be punished. But considering the national crisis, Jeanne will remember this matter. As for the 500,000 taels, Jeanne will withdraw it from the national treasury first. Later, Jeanne will slowly deduct it from the genie guards' yamen. Also, I hope Lu Gue can learn from this lesson and control his subordinates well. Don't do things that are not beneficial to the country. With a serious face and warning tone, Rouxu reprimanded Lu Gue on behalf of the emperor. Finally, there was a result, and it was the compensation method he had thought of. Lv Gue breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. He was not worried about being reprimanded at all. This matter was originally the emperor's idea. He was just taking the blame on behalf of others. Nothing would happen. This subject receives the decree and thanks His Majesty's grace. Lu Gue knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times to show respect to the emperor. After Rouxu finished telling Lu Gue about the emperor's instructions, he turned to Yang Qindong and said, "Loyal Marquis, the emperor also has a verbal decree for you." This subject receives the decree. Yang Qindong cupped his fists. His face was very respectful, but the words he said were not respectful at all, asking the envoy to pass on my behalf. This subject fell off a horse during the Battle of Earth and Wood, which triggered an old injury. Now I can't kneel asking for forgiveness. When Zhu Qiu of Ying sect was still alive, he let Yang Qindong organize 3rd Princess Changda's birthday banquet. To put it bluntly, he was just looking for trouble out of jealousy. At that time, after Yang Qindong organized the birthday banquet, in order to not give others an excuse to deal with him, he lied that he fell off a horse and injured his body. Now he said that he fell off a horse during the Battle of Earth and Wood, which triggered an old injury so he couldn't kneel. Speaking of which, it was a coincidence. But he didn't think about it. The current Yang Qindong wasn't even 20 years old. Even if he really suffered an injury at this age, he should have recovered. However, he still used this as an excuse. It was clear that he did not respect the imperial power. When Rouxu heard this, he was dissatisfied. However, considering that it was time to put the other party in an important position, if he haggled over such a small matter and delayed the important matter, the gains would not make up for the losses. Thus he could only close one eye and say, "It's fine." The emperor's verbal order is only for the Marquis of Zhongdan and this eunuch to discuss how to retreat from the enemy. Right, Walla's vanguard cavalry will arrive at the capital tomorrow, but how will the loyal Marquis deal with them? As the supervising eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Rouxu had the authority to give orders on military matters. At this moment he was asking about how to deal with the enemy. Naturally, it was within the scope of his authority, so it was reasonable. Of course, Yang Qindong knew who Rouxu was. He also knew that Rouxu was here on behalf of the imperial power. To put it bluntly, Rouxu was here to supervise the army and monitor his every move. This was also one of the characteristics of the Great Ming Dynasty. No matter where the war occurred, no matter how large the scale of the war, there would always be eunuchs participating in supervising the army. This was also a sign that the emperor wanted to control everything in his hands. However, he did not know that it was a great taboo for someone who did not know how to fight to lead an army. Just like in Tumu Castle, Guijing, as the supervising eunuch, played a role in restricting the Great Ming Dynasty's elite army, causing them to lose the best opportunity to fight due to internal friction and suffer a crushing defeat. With the previous example, how could Yang Qindong allow eunuchs to participate in military matters? Immediately, he replied with a serious expression. "Eunuch Ru, as for how to deal with the enemy, I still need to discuss with the mercenaries. Of course, with the 500,000 taels of silver, we can show our sincerity. As for how to fight the war, I'm afraid that right now, it's not up to you or me to decide. So it's like this. However, I don't know if this eunuch can go with the loyal Marquis to take a look at the mercenaries' barracks?" Rouxu said with a modest expression. This was also Zhu Qiu's intention. Although it was true that the mercenaries were invited by Yang Qindong, they were using his money. He couldn't monopolize them, could he? If possible, he would have his own people contact the mercenaries. If he could use them, wouldn't it be better? He wouldn't have to trouble the loyal Marquis with everything. To put it bluntly, he was burning the bridge after crossing the river. Zhu Qiu wanted to get rid of Yang Qindong, the middleman. Among the people, this was called forgetting one's mother after getting a wife. How could Yang Qindong not see through this little trick? No one knew that the mercenaries were actually the new Yangxia army under his command. The only reason he didn't reveal this relationship was because the timing wasn't right. As for people wanting to take advantage of the cold front, he wasn't worried at all. It was simply a waste of wax for a blind man to light a lamp. Because it wasn't time to reveal this relationship, Yang Qindong wouldn't make any decisions on behalf of the mercenaries. Instead, he said to Ru Zhu with a smile, "Eunuch Ru wants to go to the mercenaries' barracks to take a look. Marquis naturally welcomes you. However, I can't make the decision on their side. If something unpleasant happens, I hope that Eunuch Ru won't be angry." Hearing that Yang Qindong allowed it, Ru Zhu's face was immediately filled with joy. As long as this person didn't obstruct him, he was confident that he could make friends with the mercenaries. After all, the other party came to make money. Whose money wasn't money? He had the emperor as his backing and the national treasury's silver as his backing. As long as he was willing to spend money, he wasn't afraid that he wouldn't be able to convince the mercenaries. As if afraid that Yang Qindong would go back on his word, Ru Zhu hurriedly said, "No problem, no problem. When the time comes, just introduce me to them. As for the other matters, I'll take care of them." "Good, then prepare the silver and set out." Yang Qindong's face was full of smiles. Good. Ru Zhu hurriedly agreed. Then he turned to Lu Gue and said, "Commander, I'll have to trouble you to send some people to escort 500,000 taels of silver from the national treasury to the mercenaries' compound." "Thank you for your trouble." Ru Zhu and Lu Gue were both Eunuch Jin's trusted aides. Their positions were also very close, so it was natural for them to be polite. To this, Lu Gue also politely replied, "It's my duty, it's my duty. I'll arrange for people to do it right away." The morning's questioning finally had a result. In the end, it ended with the imperial power backing down. Of course, to the outside world, this was the embroidered uniform guards backing down, not the emperor backing down. The 100 embroidered uniform guards pushed out 10 large carriages. In each carriage there were 10 large chests. A total of 500,000 taels of silver headed straight for the mercenaries' barracks. As if afraid that Yang Qindong would do something bad, when Lu Gue went to arrange for people to go to the national treasury to get the silver, Ru Zhu accompanied him the entire time. He really didn't leave his side and didn't give him any space or time to spread the news. However, what Ru Zhu didn't know was that when Yang Qindong faced him, he stood with his hands behind his back. The hands behind his back were constantly making gestures to convey what he wanted to say. All of this was clearly seen by Tiger's Mane, who was standing behind him as a servant. After understanding what the young master wanted to say, he quietly left. Ru Zhu didn't care about this at all. He only wanted to keep an eye on Yang Qindong so that he didn't spread the news, especially not to the mercenaries. Other people and matters were not within his scope of concern. Just like this, Ru Zhu accompanied Yang Qindong until the silver was prepared. Only then did Ru Zhu happily ask the loyal Marquis to accompany him to the mercenaries' courtyard. Yang Qindong gladly agreed, and the group left the embroidered uniform guards' yamen in a grandiose manner. Along the way, this group quickly attracted the attention of the common people they encountered. Spies from the Bureau of Security had already been planted in the crowd. With their intentional spread, the news that the embroidered uniform guard was looking for trouble with the mercenaries protecting the capital quickly spread. Many common people began to reprimand the embroidered uniform guard, and the balance of public opinion began to tilt in favor of the mercenaries. Leading public opinion for one's own use had not been noticed at the time, but Yang Qindong knew that in many cases, obtaining the support of the common people was already half the battle. Of course, there was no need for him to explain these things that would later be regarded as the truth to others. There was a wide road in front of the mercenaries' courtyard. He had only chosen this place because he had considered the problem of gathering an army. When Yang Qindong and Ru Zhu arrived, it naturally didn't feel crowded at all. "This place is not bad. Loyal Marquis is quite considerate." Ru Zhu seemed intent on getting close to Yang Qindong, and he would only be satisfied with a few words of praise for this courtyard. Regarding this, Yang Qindong only smiled without saying anything. He naturally knew what the other party was thinking. If it weren't for the fact that he was still useful, the other party would have already coldly glared at him and even tried to make trouble for him. For this eunuch who had no emotions and only cared about profit and power, Yang Qindong was already giving him a lot of face by showing him some courtesy. As for any words of thanks or praise, that was simply out of the question. Since the cold vanguard had already entered the capital, no one would be able to make things difficult for him in the future. This was a display of his confidence. Yang Qindong's nonchalant attitude and silent smile along the way was seen by Ru Zhu, and in exchange he sneered coldly in his heart. He had already decided that once he got involved with the mercenaries, the loyal Marquis would just go wherever he wanted to go. Even eunuchs would look down on nobles who relied on the power of others. At the entrance of the courtyard, 4 cold vanguard soldiers stood at attention. They held a black and cold 95 style in their hands, and the gleaming bayonets on the body of the spear gave off an intimidating aura. How mighty! Ru Zhu praised sincerely after seeing the might of the 4 mercenaries from afar. As they spoke, the group arrived at the entrance of the courtyard. 4 gleaming bayonets were placed horizontally in front of everyone. This is an important military area. Unrelated people are not allowed to disturb us. Please leave quickly or else bear the consequences. The 4 cold vanguard soldiers didn't show the slightest hint of fear despite the size of the group. On the contrary, they even took the initiative to speak. Chapter 193. Yang Qindong stood in the middle of the crowd and watched all of this with an indifferent expression. He had no intention of walking out. He had not come into contact with the cold front for a long time. He also wanted to see the mental state of this troop from the side. Ru Zhu stood in the front row of the crowd. Especially when he was about to reach the entrance of the courtyard, he intentionally quickened his pace. His intention to seize the opportunity was very obvious. Yang Qindong was happy to see this happen. That was because he knew that the cold front would not treat Ru Zhu well just because of some silver. If they really did that, it would be equivalent to being expelled from the cold front. Only with iron discipline would an iron army appear. Yang Qindong was very confident in this point. However, some people did not know about this. After seeing that the front was blocked, Ru Zhu took the initiative to walk out. He then put on a smile on his face and bowed respectfully as he said, "Brothers, please allow me to report. I am a supervising eunuch of the Great Ming's Imperial Horse Directorate. This time I am here to deliver the silver. Do you think you can let us pass? Step back. If you take half a step forward, you will be killed without mercy." In response to Ru Zhu's attempt to curry favor with him, the platoon leader of the cold front, who was standing guard at the entrance, had a serious expression on his face. At the same time, he pulled the bolt of the 95 style gun in his hand and a murderous aura spread out in all directions. In the past, Ru Zhu was only an internal envoy. When had he ever seen such a scene? He was immediately frightened and involuntarily stepped back. His mouth trembled as he said, "This eunuch is really here to deliver the silver. If you don't believe me, you can call your general out to verify my authenticity. Who is making a racket outside the courtyard? Do you know that this is a military area? Unrelated people are not allowed to come near." A shout came from inside the gate. Then, the sound of orderly footsteps could be heard. Soon after, a dozen or so cold front soldiers led by Ting Shan walked out of the courtyard. As soon as these people appeared, they raised the 95 style and held it in their hands. Then, they coldly stared at the Great Ming Empire's embroidered uniform guards outside the door with hawk-like eyes. It was as if they were ready to fight if they didn't get along. The embroidered uniform guards were considered ferocious. Who knew how many people were bullied by them? From commoners to merchants to officials and nobles, who wouldn't tremble when they saw them, afraid that they would be remembered? This also made them feel superior to others. But for some reason, the moment he saw Lung Feng, a chill rushed out from the soles of his feet. It felt as if he was being targeted by a ferocious tiger and could become a piece of meat in its stomach at any moment. Some of the more timid embroidered uniform guards didn't even know where to put their hands and feet. They just lowered their heads and didn't say a word. Ru Zhu also felt a chill spreading from his head to his feet. He did not know that this was because Ting Shan and the others had killed too many people on Little Ryukyu Island. However, no matter how scared he was, since he received the imperial order, he always wanted to complete the mission. After he raised his head and saw Ting Shan's murderous aura, he immediately lowered his head. Then he tried to use a negotiating tone and said, "General, I am a supervising eunuch of the Great Ming's Imperial Horse Directorate. This time, I am here on the orders of our emperor to deliver silver to you." Deliver silver? Hearing Ru Zhu's words, Ting Shan's murderous aura seemed to have cooled down a lot. Sensing that the other party's tone seemed to have loosened, Ru Zhu thought to himself that silver was indeed the most useful thing. He immediately said, Yes, we are here to deliver silver to you. However, how should I address you, General? Are you the highest-ranking leader here?" "This battalion commander isn't the highest-ranking leader? What? Are you looking down on this battalion commander's low position?" Ting Shan looked at Ru Zhu with an ice-cold gaze. His murderous aura reappeared. Ru Zhu only asked about the other party's identity and position because he wanted to get to know the other party's higher-ups in the shortest time possible and establish a good relationship with them. He really didn't have any other intentions. However, after being reminded by Ting Shan and thinking about his previous behavior, He seemed to be a little too impatient. For a moment, Ru Zhu regretted his impatient actions. He opened his mouth and said, "No, no, this general misunderstood. This eunuch didn't mean that. Leave your money and get out of here." Ting Shan had no intention of listening to Ru Zhu's explanation. He seemed to have been angered by Ru Zhu's words. At this moment, he waved his hand and looked like he was going to chase them away. "Leave your silver and scram." This was completely different from what Ru Zhu had imagined. For a moment he couldn't accept it. "General, shouldn't you call your leader over and discuss this?" Bang, 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 bang. A series of gunshots rang out, and the tiles on the roof of the house opposite the courtyard were broken into countless pieces. Then the tiles fell from above, raising waves of dust. Ting Shan opened fire. This was how he answered Ru Zhu's question. Facts speak louder than words. After a series of gunshots, all the brocade gown guards present were stunned on the spot. Then someone shouted, "Oh my God!" Next, the brocade gown guards gave up on their carriages and retreated in large strides. Ru Zhu was also in the crowd. In fact, his speed of retreat was not slower than anyone else. It had to be said that in the face of life-threatening danger, even a eunuch's reaction could be surprisingly fast. Everyone was retreating. Soon Yang Qindong, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Qiu Vi of the first guard who had been standing in the crowd appeared. Initially, when Ting Shan saw that some people did not retreat, he revealed a trace of anger. He wanted to teach them a lesson for ignoring his cold front. However, when the crowd retreated and Yang Qindong stood at the very front, Ting Shan, who originally had a ferocious look on his face and looked like he would attack at any moment, immediately turned into astonishment, followed by excitement and agitation. His originally straight and strong legs now looked like they were about to bend and kneel on the ground. The earliest cold front was personally trained by Yang Qindong. Even Lung Feng, who was in his later years, had only heard legends about the sixth young master. It could be said that in the most elite of the cold front, if there was only one person who could not be disrespected, and who everyone respected and had to give a thumbs up to, it would be Yang Qindong. Even Commander Lung Song of the army, although he also had the word Leng in his name, he only wore the army's Lung Feng uniform. It was more like in the Navy, Commander Gao Xiong's uniform. However, with only Yang Qindong, no matter if it was the army, the navy, or even the air force who were practicing hot air balloons, they all respected him. He had a godlike reputation. When Ting Shan saw him, how could he not want to kneel on the ground? Cough. With a soft cough, Yang Qindong could tell what Ting Shan was going to do and what kind of performance he was going to show. He immediately reminded him. Although the cough was not loud, it shocked Ting Shan like a sudden clap of thunder. When he saw Commander Ru and a group of Imperial guards looking at him from the corner of his eyes, he finally remembered where he was and what kind of situation he was in. Ting Shan forcefully put away his thoughts of kneeling and bowing to Yang Qindong. Then he made a gesture of inviting him in. Following Ting Shan's action, all the cold front soldiers standing on both sides of him straightened their bodies as if they were soldiers waiting for the king to inspect them. Some of these cold front soldiers were personally trained by Yang Qindong, some of their military ranks were taught by the sixth young master, and some of them did not know Yang Qindong. However, this did not stop them from expressing their respect for the young master. He really wanted to say something to these brothers, even if it was just to pat them on the shoulder and give them some encouragement. However, Yang Qindong knew that this was not the time to do this. If he appeared too close to the mercenaries, it would be hard to avoid suspicion. This would not be beneficial to his next plan. With his back facing Commander Ru and the others, Yang Qindong could only smile at these cold front soldiers. However, this smile was like the sun in the cold winter, making these brothers feel a warmth from the bottom of their hearts. At this moment, their hearts were beating rapidly. This was the godlike sixth young master, and he was smiling at them? With this experience, they would be able to brag about it for a while when they returned to Crimson City. Ting Shan also suppressed the excitement in his heart. After Yang Qindong stepped into the courtyard, he quickly followed him. At this moment, a large group of people had already knelt down in the courtyard. The leaders were Commander Lung Song and Battalion Commander Wu Sheng. "Welcome, sixth young master." The voice was low, but it was more like the ray of sunlight before dawn, ready to explode with powerful energy at any time. "Brothers, thank you for your hard work." Facing close to 300 cold front soldiers, Yang Qindong was also very excited. In his eyes, these were his children. They were created by him and they were also his pride. The words "thank you for your hard work" caused many cold front soldiers who would not even blink in the face of death to cry. Perhaps to them, these were the words they had been waiting for. Yang Qindong was also very excited in his heart. At this time he felt as if he had returned to the barracks of his previous life, and saw those outstanding soldiers he had brought with him. This made him unable to calm down. However, Yang Qindong, who had lived 2 lives, knew what he wanted to protect, what he pursued, and what his dreams were. In order to achieve this final goal, he could not do whatever he wanted at this moment. Hence, he suppressed the excitement in his heart and walked in front of Lung Song. He patted his shoulder and said, "Not bad, you're more sturdy than before. Thank you, 6th young master, for your praise." Lung Song, who did not like to smile and always had a stern face in the eyes of the soldiers, actually smiled at this moment. His smile was so carefree, so natural, and so sincere. Chapter 194. He walked up to Ting Shan, who had just returned to his unit, and lightly nodded. Extending a hand, he smoothed out Ting Shan's uniform. "Very good. You're much more spirited than before." "Thank you, 6th young master, for your praise," Ting Shan replied in a low voice, suppressing his excitement. Taking another step forward, Yang Qindong arrived in front of Wu Sheng. Extending his right hand, he formed a fist and punched Wu Sheng's chest. "Very good. I heard that you've worked very hard. Now that you're a battalion commander, keep it up." Wu Sheng did not complain after being punched. On the contrary, he excitedly called out, "6th young master, please be at ease. Wu Sheng will definitely perform even better and strive to become regimental commander as soon as possible, surpassing Regiment Commander Lung Song and becoming his commanding officer." This cry immediately drew laughter from the other members of the Cold Front. One by one, it took him a full hour to greet each of his brothers. He could still call out the names of some of them, but he didn't recognize some of them. However, this didn't stop them from quickly becoming friends and brothers. Lung Song, Ting Shan, and Wu Sheng followed at Yang Qindong's side, introducing each of their unfamiliar brothers to him, recounting the contributions they had made, the areas in which they had excelled, and their individual characteristics. In this hour, Yang Qindong had gained a deeper understanding of the 300 Cold Front members. At this moment, the 500,000 taels of silver had been carried into the courtyard. Even the Cold Front members who had been guarding the gate had entered the courtyard to greet the 6th young master. "Very good. Your performance has greatly pleased this young master. You truly live up to the name of the Cold Front." Once everyone stood in line in front of Yang Qindong, the founder of the Cold Front began to speak. "The Cold Front is like the cold edge of a weapon. But it has a purpose, and it is unyielding, unstoppable, and invincible. Today you were able to stand out from the rest of the Cold Front and come to the capital, come to this young master's side. This is even more proof of your excellence, that you are outstanding members of the Cold Front. For this reason this young master is proud of you." After a round of encouragement, Yang Qindong sensed that the morale of the Cold Front soldiers had risen to an unprecedented level. Yang Qindong's face, which was originally full of smiles, suddenly changed and became much more serious. "I don't care what kind of glorious past you have and what kind of outstanding performance you have. But now, this young master hopes that you can forget everything about the past and face the reality before you again. That is, you will be fighting against 10, 100, or even 1,000 people by yourself. I wonder if you can do it?" "Yes." With a low growl, the veins on the necks of the Cold Front members tightened, as if they would burst at any moment. This was their way of expressing their desire for victory and their confidence in themselves. "Very good. Now, I give the order for those who should rest to rest. The 3 battalion commanders, come with me." Yang Qindong knew that tomorrow's battle would descend, so in order for the soldiers to face the enemy with full energy and vigor, he gave the order for them to rest. With the order to disperse, the 300 Cold Front members left in an orderly fashion. There was not the slightest bit of panic in the process. This was the performance of a true elite force. From this, one could see that the great effort Yang Qindong had put into training them in formation had been effective. Lung Song, Ting Shan, and Wu Sheng followed Yang Qindong to a secret room deep within the courtyard. Qiu Vi led a group of guards to search the place. After confirming that there was nothing suspicious or dangerous, Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei flanked Yang Qindong on either side. It wasn't that Yang Qindong didn't trust Lung Feng's team, but as a leader he should have such an imposing manner. It was said that sometimes distance makes the heart grow fonder. Between a superior and a subordinate, there should be enough distance. Otherwise, if the relationship was too close, there would be a lack of mystery. Naturally, when he wanted to lead them, the words he said would be somewhat discounted. Tiger's Mane and the others' actions were seen by Lung Song and the other 2. If it were anyone else who dared to treat them like this, they would have been furious and would have even taken out their weapons to fight. However, this was allowed by the sixth young master, so they did not dare to show the slightest displeasure or displeasure. Speaking of which, all of this was thanks to Luan Shaoqian and Mo Qingyu, and the other political instructors. It was because of the existence of these political instructors that they constantly told the Cold Front members about the brilliance and greatness of the sixth young master. Gradually, everyone began to view Yang Qindong as a god. Because of this, who would dare to disobey his orders? Not to mention disobeying anything, if anyone dared to say anything bad about the sixth young master, who knew how many people would put that person to death in an instant. At this point, even Lung Song, the only regiment commander in the army, did not dare to have any other thoughts or actions. Perhaps a regiment commander's position was already very high, and could be said to be the true commander of the army. But if he dared to say that Yang Qindong was not good, he was afraid that even the brothers who had the best relationship with him would turn against him because of this. This was the power of political instructors. They were able to eliminate the possibility of betrayal from the Cold Front members. Yang Qindong sat at the head of the table. Tiger's Mane then spread out a map that he had already drawn on the table. Yang Qindong pointed at it and said, "Come and see." Outside the courtyard, looking at the closed door, Ruju was not willing to leave like this. Thus he did not leave. Instead, he stood on the street and waited. However, this wait lasted for more than 2 hours. Fortunately, there was an accompanying eunuch who got a wooden stool for him to sit on. Otherwise, he would not have been able to hold on. Why hasn't the loyal Marquis come out yet? Could it be that something has happened? One of the accompanying embroidered uniform guard Baihu saw that so much time had passed, but there was still no movement from the small courtyard. He could not help but ask suspiciously. "Don't speak nonsense." Ruju's face stiffened as if he was reprimanding him. However, in his heart he was thinking that it would be best if something happened to Yang Qindong. If that was the case, the matter of communicating with the mercenaries would fall to him. At that time he would be able to reap a lot of benefits. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Just as Ruju was thinking about this, the door suddenly opened. Yang Qindong, dressed in green, walked out in large strides. As soon as Yang Qindong appeared, Ruju's eyes were fixed on him. He wanted to see if there would be any important figures from the mercenaries coming out to see him off. If that was the case, he could take the opportunity to say a few words and get familiar with them first. Unfortunately, only Yang Qindong and his servants came out. Not a single mercenary came out to see them off. This caused Ruju's face to be filled with disappointment. However, what he did not know was that the disappointment was yet to come. After Yang Qindong walked out of the courtyard, he directly came to Ruju and said with a serious expression, "Eunuch Ru, I have already tried my best to communicate with the mercenary generals. However, they did not agree to a eunuch being in charge of the army. They also said that since they have received the money, they naturally would not let the Walla army take the capital." After saying this, Yang Qindong shrugged his shoulders, looking as if he was powerless. Ruju felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He was frozen in place for who knew how long before he came back to his senses. At this time, Yang Qindong had already walked past him, heading in the direction of the immortal abode with his servants. "Wait a moment, Marquis Yang. What is going on here? The imperial supervisor has always been in the Great Ming Dynasty. Why are they making an exception now? I don't think this will work," Ruju said with a face full of unwillingness. He had already patted his chest in front of the emperor and Jining, saying that he would use the war as an opportunity to establish a good relationship with the mercenaries. He would also do his best to obtain a few new firearms, providing the best specimens for the Great Ming Dynasty's development. But now, even his authority to supervise the army had been taken away. Didn't that mean that this wish could no longer be fulfilled? Yang Qindong stopped in his tracks when Ruju called out to him. He suddenly turned around and said, "Eunuch Ru, you said that this is the law of the Great Ming Dynasty, but these people do not belong to the Great Ming, so they do not need to follow it. Of course, if Eunuch Ru is not satisfied, you can ask them yourself. However, if you provoke their displeasure, then you will have to take responsibility for the consequences. Right, I must remind you that the vanguard cavalry of the Walla will arrive tomorrow. It would be best if nothing unexpected were to happen." As if it was a kind reminder, Yang Qindong turned around and left with a hearty laugh, leaving behind a stunned Ru Xing. He was filled with unwillingness and resentment. Of course, he wanted to do as Yang Qindong said and ask the mercenaries about the Great Ming Dynasty's rules. However, after the embroidered uniform guard's reckless actions last night, he didn't dare to do that again. What if he really angered them and they demanded money again? He had already paid 500,000 taels. He had already lost face once. Was he going to lose face a second time? AI. Ruju let out a long sigh. He knew that he would not be able to complete the decree this time. He really didn't know that the emperor would be so furious after finding out about this. It seemed that he still needed to greet eunuch Jining and protect his current position first. As for forming a good relationship with the mercenaries once the war started, it wouldn't end in a day or two. When the time came, an opportunity should appear. Putting aside the fact that Ruju went to the palace to find Jining and reported what happened to the emperor, it caused Zhu Qiu to be extremely angry. The news quickly spread in the city that the 10,000 elite vanguard cavalry of the Walla would arrive in the capital tomorrow. When the news came out, the entire city was terrified. Some people began to pack their bags and prepare to leave the capital. Some cowards who had nowhere else to go began to pray at home, hoping that the great Ming dynasty's army could win a battle and defeat the wolves of the Walla. Chapter 195. The capital, which had just regained its peace due to the low price of rice, was once again bustling with activity. In the immortal abode, the girls were also affected. They all came over to ask Yang Qindong, who was practicing calligraphy, what was going on outside. Why was the commander still so calm when the battle was about to begin? Yang Qindong had unknowingly become obsessed with writing. In his last life, he had been running all over the place to complete missions. How could he possibly find the time to compose himself and write? Now that he finally had the time and opportunity, he naturally had to put in some effort. At the very least, when he inscribed words for someone in the future, they wouldn't look too bad. Sixth brother, sixth brother. A series of feminine voices came from outside the study. Yang Qindong, who was in the middle of writing, sighed softly. He knew that his plans to practice calligraphy today had been dashed. He only had 4 women and it was already so lively. He really didn't know what it would be like with the addition of other women in the future. At this moment, Yang Qindong suddenly missed the old Yang clan residence in Jianing Manor. Back then he could really do whatever he wanted and no one would bother him. While Yang Qindong was still reminiscing about the old days, Hu Yan and the other 3 girls ran in. As soon as they saw Yang Qindong still holding the pen, they immediately surrounded him and for a while they kept asking him questions. Yang Qindong couldn't tell who was asking what, but he had a rough idea of what was going on. The 4 women all wanted to know if they could defeat the Walla cavalry tomorrow. That was the cavalry that had defeated Ying Zong and Shi Heng. They were all worried for Yang Qindong. Well, your husband knows what you are worried about. How about this? Tomorrow all of you will put on makeup and go to the battlefield with Lu Lang. What do you think? Yang Qindong suddenly raised his voice and said something that shocked the 4 women. Since ancient times, it had been an ironclad rule that men should fight on the battlefield and women should stay at home. Apart from Hua Mulan and the female generals of the Yang clan, very few women were allowed to fight on the battlefield. However, Yang Qindong just had to make this request. How could these women not be shocked? Oh, Lu Lang, are you okay? Can we go to the battlefield too? Hu Yan's face was filled with disbelief. At the same time, her face was flushed red. Obviously, this proposal had touched her nerves and made her begin to yearn for it. Of course, I've already prepared your clothes. I borrowed them from the mercenaries and put them in your room. Take them and see if they fit you. Yang Qindong's eyes were as clear as a spring, and his face was full of love. When the 4 women heard this, they immediately ignored Yang Qindong and walked towards their rooms. After a short while, the 4 girls in camouflage uniforms returned to Yang Qindong. They were also in camouflage uniforms. When the 4 women wore the custom-made camouflage uniforms, their graceful figures were immediately highlighted. They actually had such a temperament and were so different from the rest. Hu Yan and the other 2 women looked at each other and chattered non-stop. Only Qiao Yin, who knew the truth, kept smiling. She knew that these clothes were not borrowed at all. They had already arranged for the garment factory in Crimson City to make them according to the women's figures. At that time, the concept of men being superior to women was very serious. Even the few men who loved their wives would be called a lioness from Hedong. Sometimes, these men had to worry about other people's opinions and do some things that hurt women. Only Yang Qindong really doted on his women. When he did things, he did not care about other people's opinions and thoughts. While the women were satisfied with the military uniform, they were even more satisfied with Yang Qindong's attitude towards them. This was what made them happy. Seeing the 4 women slowly calm down from their excitement, Yang Qindong smiled and said, "These clothes are not for you to wear for free. There is a mission." "There is a mission. What mission? When Hu Yan and the other two women heard that there was a mission, their breathing became a lot more rapid. They even wondered if Lu Lang really wanted them to go to the battlefield. But what could they do without the strength to truss a chicken? The four women looked at him suspiciously. Yang Qindong chuckled and said, "What are you thinking? How can I be willing to let you fight the enemy? Your task is to record the most wonderful scene on the battlefield, then go back and edit it into a program for more people to watch, and completely spread the glorious image of Lu Lang." Yang Qindong said very arrogantly. Hu Yan and the other two women laughed. But after laughing they felt deeply gratified. Since Lu Lang dared to let them walk around the battlefield, it was enough to show that he was full of confidence in this battle. In fact, this was the real reason why Yang Qindong wanted to take the women to the battlefield. If he wanted to make a program, he could have learned it from the soldiers who participated in the battle in the future. But he did not do that. Instead, he wanted to take them with him. He wanted to tell the women through this battle that the battlefield was not as dangerous as they imagined. At least on the battlefield with him, Yang Qindong, they could still be very relaxed. After tomorrow's battle, when Yang Qindong went out to lead troops to battle in the future, the women would not have to be so worried and afraid at home. The four girls left in high spirits. From the looks of it, it was clear that they were going to wear the new military uniforms and walk around the Yangjia village for everyone to see. They were going to receive some envious gazes. Yang Qindong stayed in the study, discussing something with Tiger's man and Yang San about tomorrow's battle. "Yang San, is your security bureau ready for tomorrow's battle?" Looking at the actual leader of the security bureau, Yang Qindong's tone had a trace of concern and comfort. "Young master, please rest assured that everything is ready. I promise not to let irrelevant people near the gate." Yang San replied respectfully and confidently. "Very good, this battle must be fought with a sense of mystery. You all remember, as an opponent, the less they know about your methods, the more they will be afraid of you. What we need to do is to form and maintain this sense of mystery to the greatest extent, so that the opponent can't figure out what to do." After saying this to Yang San, he said to Tiger's man, "Tell butler Yang Ning to pay attention to the security situation of the Yang family village. Presumably, some people who can't find out about the mercenaries will have their eyes on the Yang family village. These few days, young master, I have to deal with the Walla army, so I don't have time to deal with the matters of the village. I will leave Dao Zhao's second guard team to protect the village." "Yes, young master, I will inform Captain Dao Xiao in a while. However, I think that he will not be happy if he is not allowed to participate in the battle and is instead staying in the village." Tiger's man chuckled. Dao Xiao would definitely feel very wronged if he was not allowed to participate in the battle. Thinking back to the Battle of the Tuma Castle, they did not go and instead stayed. Now that they were being asked to stay, it would be strange if they were happy. Yang Qindong smiled at this. "Tell Dao Xiao that the division of tasks is different, but they are all equally important. Tell him not to be arrogant and impatient. In the future, the young master will have a lot of things to do, so there is no need to worry that they will not have a chance to participate in the battle." Yang Qindong was preparing for tomorrow's battle, and he was full of confidence. This was his first real battle in this world, so of course he had to make an exciting appearance. In comparison, there was another army that was also full of confidence heading towards the capital. They were Wallace's 10,000 vanguard cavalry. The Battle of Tuma Fortress was a great victory, and it was unknown how many Ming Dynasty officials were killed. If it were not for Yang Qindong's intervention, perhaps even Ming Emperor Zhu Qizhen would have been killed or captured. This battle also made Wallace's appetite grow. Especially after Xi Ning defected to the enemy, she revealed many things about the Ming Dynasty, including many secrets of the imperial court and the imperial palace. According to what Xi Ning said, the Ming Dynasty's civil and military officials were not on the same side. They were very hostile and would often crush each other. For example, the Battle of the Tumu Castle was a conspiracy by the civil officials against the military officials in order to severely injure them. In this battle, didn't a general like Zhang Fu die on the battlefield? However, in reality, it was true that the civil and military officials were at odds with each other. However, in the Battle of the Tuma Castle, many generals died, so how much better were the civil officials? Again, if not for Yang Qindong's intervention, at least 2 ministers would have died on the battlefield. It didn't seem worth it to use such a heavy capital to design a plan. However, Walla didn't know this. They won the battle and thought that Xi Ning was right. Even when they were fighting against Shi Heng, it was Xi Ning who came up with the idea. First, they pretended to be weak and then baited the enemy step by step. In the end, they defeated the enemy. Because of this, Xi Ning became a good friend of Walla's people. Sai Bian Wang, who was in charge of leading the vanguard, was leading the army to the capital of the great Ming dynasty. At the same time, he was asking Xi Ning if there were any powerful generals in the great Ming dynasty that could fight against him. Xi Ning had thought about this question many times in his mind. He had thought of almost all of the courtiers and confirmed that there were still generals who could lead troops, but he could not think of anyone who could truly command an army. General, in the Battle of the Tumu Castle, the Ming dynasty's military officials were all killed. There is no one left who can fight against our Walla's army. In addition, Yingzong went to Nanjing to rebuild the imperial court. The Ming dynasty, which was divided into two, has nothing to fear. Haha, doesn't that mean that the Ming dynasty's capital is at our fingertips? The wealth and women there will all belong to our Walla? Ah. Xi Ning laughed wildly. He was imagining beautiful women in his arms, delicious food in his mouth, and piles of gold and silver. Xi Ning looked down on the Xi Ning who only thought about wealth and women. A person who was too greedy couldn't achieve anything great. General, now that the Ming dynasty's army is empty and weak, what we should do now is to lead the army into the capital and then go all the way south until we occupy the entire Ming dynasty. Chapter 196. Yes, Brother Xi Ning is right. But this matter still requires Big Brother Yeshin's decision. I think it's better to enter the capital first. The competition king chuckled. On the surface he seemed to believe Xi Ning's suggestion, but in reality he was short-sighted and had limited knowledge. It would be difficult for him to achieve anything great. Seeing this clearly, Xi Ning simply didn't say anything more. Once the capital was truly conquered, leader Yes Hen would probably arrive soon. At that time, it wouldn't be too late to make a suggestion. At this time, both Sagan Wang and Xi Ning treated the capital of the great Ming dynasty as their own backyard. In their view, wherever the army arrived, the enemy would definitely surrender. But they did not know that Yang Qindong had been waiting for them for a long time. Another day, the sun slowly rose from the east. With the arrival of a new day, the capital was extremely quiet. Because of the fear of war, those who could leave had basically left. Those who stayed behind were those who didn't want to leave for various reasons. In Yang Qindong's words, those who stayed behind had a stable mentality. Even if the war started, they wouldn't easily cause trouble. With no one causing trouble in the capital, Yang Qindong had less to worry about, and he could focus on fighting the Tile army. Although he had the Yangtze's new army and the world's most advanced firearms, he still had too few people. Including the 100 cold vanguards led by Xiao Feng, they only had 400 people. Facing an enemy dozens of times their number, they couldn't be careless. War had always been a very serious matter, and it was also the easiest thing to change. A careless mistake, or a problem in a link could directly change the outcome. Of course, Yang Qindong was still very confident in the Yangtze's new army's cold vanguards. They were forbidden from doing anything, so there wouldn't be any problems. What he was worried about was the 10,000 city defense army that the emperor had given him, including the 5,500 soldiers from the warden's office. These people were used to running amok in the city. Bullying ordinary people was not a problem, but when faced with the elite Walla cavalry, it was hard to say what the result would be. Even when they were fighting in a favorable battle, it was doubtful whether they could achieve complete victory. Thus, early in the morning, Yang Qindong had called over the 5 commanders and led them to the north gate of the capital, the Dishing Gate, to stand on the gate tower. Along with the 5 commanders, there was a general called Yang Guang. He was originally the deputy commander. When Shi Heng, the commander, lost the battle and disappeared, he naturally became extremely important. Yang Guang was quite capable. More importantly, he had a good attitude. When he saw Yang Qindong, he would call him Marquis, then Marquis. He felt very close. Under his lead, Sun Tong and the other commanders also changed from calling him Yang Ho to Marquis. Standing in front of Yang Guang, Sun Tong and the other 5 commanders, Yang Qindong pointed behind him, which was the empty space outside Dishing Gate. Before long, the Walla cavalry will appear here. A big battle is unavoidable. Everyone, are you afraid? Yang Qindong's tone was very calm, even cold. It was as if the appearance of the enemy was like a story, unable to stir up any waves in his heart. In comparison, the 6 commanders' expressions were not as good. Yang Guang and Sun Tong were still in a better state. At least they could still stand up straight. Tao Jin, Yang Jie, Gao Li and Mao Fushou, the 4 commanders' faces were obviously much uglier. If one looked carefully, their legs were trembling. In this month, the morning in the capital was not hot, but it was far from cold. However, the 4 of them were so nervous that they broke out in cold sweat. This was enough to show the fear in their hearts. Forget it, the four of you will follow what we said before. Each of you will lead 200 soldiers to maintain order in the city. But remember, before the enemy enters the city, there cannot be chaos in the capital. Otherwise, if there is a problem, the person who will be punished will be punished. Yang Chendong did not want Tao Jin and the other three to stay. Their presence was not only a good thing for the morale of the soldiers, it could also lead the other soldiers astray and make them feel afraid. Hearing that they did not have to face the Walla cavalry, Tao Jin and the other three heaved a sigh of relief. They clasped their fists and bowed to Yang Chendong before retreating from the tower. Only Yang Guang and Sun Tong were left. Yang Chendong said, "Vice Commander Yang, you are in charge of leading 5,000 cavalry to remain under the Dishing Gate. When the time comes when I give the order, lead the army out of the city in pursuit. Remember, without Marquis' order you are not to attack. Also, when you leave the city, do not go too far. 10 li is the limit. If you exceed this distance, immediately retreat. Do you understand?" Yang Guang, who was called out, was confused. From Yang Chendong's words, he was leading the cavalry out to chase after the enemy. Did he not need to fight a battle? If he did not fight, how could he be sure that the enemy would escape? If they did not escape, how could they chase after them? But while he was confused, military orders were like mountains. Yang Chendong was the commanding general personally appointed by Zhu Qiu. Since there was a military order, he only needed to follow it. "Yes, please rest assured, Marquis. I will definitely act according to your orders." After saying this, Yang Guang clasped his fists and left to make preparations. 5,000 strong horses. This was a number that had been gathered after searching the city for a long time. It was also one of the strongest forces in the capital that everyone could see. Yang Guang also left, leaving behind Sun Tong, the commanding general, standing there with his chest puffed out and his head raised. He also had an imposing aura. In history, Sun Tong had chosen to rely on Jining. He had a glorious time, but in the end, his ending was very tragic. After understanding this part of history from the book, Yang Chendong realized that this person still had some ability. As long as he was guided well, he would become a good general. Thus, he intended to train him and keep him by his side. "Commander Sun, I'll leave the remaining 4,000 people in the warden's office to you. They are all placed above the Dishing Gate. You have to give people the impression that there are soldiers everywhere. Can you do it?" Facing Sun Tong, Yang Chendong gave him his task. "Please rest assured, Marquis. I will definitely do a good job," Sun Tong replied in a loud voice, but in reality he was already very confused. What did the loyal Marquis mean? Was he only leading soldiers to guard the city gates? Did he not need to send people to meet the enemy outside the city? It seemed that he was going to passively defend the city, but he didn't know if he would be able to do so. Sun Tong went to make arrangements, his mind filled with confusion. Just as he was wondering if he would have to rely on the city gate towers to stop Walla's army, a new order came down that left him completely confused. He didn't understand what Yang Chendong wanted to do. The new mission was to close all the gates of the capital except for the Dishing Gate. The only one that wasn't closed, the Dishing Gate, had to be left wide open so that people could walk straight in. He didn't understand why the gates had to be opened. Wouldn't this be allowing Walla's army to enter? It had to be known that cavalry was most proficient in land attacks. If they defended the city gates, they might have a chance of winning. But if they opened the gates and let the people in, wouldn't that mean that they were giving up their advantage? This would only increase the difficulty of defending the city. Sun Tong, who couldn't understand, arranged for people to follow Yang Chendong's orders while ordering his trusted aide to inform eunuch Jin Ing in the palace. The wheels of history were so similar. In his previous life he had relied on Jin Ing, and in this life he was going to follow the same trend. In the palace, all the officials were summoned to the court. Compared to the usual court meetings, all the officials had lost the mood to submit memorials today. Zhu Qiu sat on the dragon throne, but no matter how big the dragon throne was, it didn't seem to be able to calm him down. As if he was on pins and needles, he would move his butt from time to time, vividly displaying his anxiety. In reality, he couldn't help but worry. If the capital fell, it would be the end of his reign as emperor. He would become the second emperor after Zhu Qiu to be defeated by Walla, becoming a disgrace in the history of the great Ming dynasty. Whether he would become a lofty emperor, a prisoner, or even a dead man all depended on how this battle to defend the capital was fought. Unlike in history, Yu Qian, the assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel, was no longer present. Under Yang Chendong's guidance, they did not engage in battle with Walla's army on the outskirts. After Shi Heng's defeat, All the pressure was focused on the Victory Gate. That place would decide the final outcome of this battle. Reporting. Just as Zhu Qiu's face was still filled with apprehension, the soldier sent by Sun Pao arrived outside the throne room. Enter the hall. Jin Ing, who was standing next to Zhu Qiu, was also concerned about the outcome of this battle. This time he didn't wait for the emperor to agree before shouting out orders. At this moment of life and death, no one was thinking about whether Jin Ing had overstepped her authority. Everyone was thinking about whether there would be a result in front of them. Was it a victory? Or had they lost? The soldier was allowed to enter, so he lowered his head and walked into the hall. Soon after, he dropped to his knees and loudly reported, "Marquis of Loyalty has ordered the Victory Gate to be opened. Deputy Commander Yang Guang has led 5,000 cavalry to lie in wait within the city. Commander Sun Tong has led 4,000 some soldiers to guard the gate tower of the Victory Gate." What? As the soldier finished explaining the situation at the gate, the imperial court instantly grew rowdy. How could they possibly open the gate? The Wala cavalry are most skilled in charging formations. The tall walls are our only support. Abandoning the gate tower to defend is simply avoiding our advantage. Minister of War Yi Ming loudly proclaimed in order to show off his erudition. That's right, that's right. Marquis of Loyalty's actions are truly inappropriate. The other officials began to jeer. Enough. The Minister of Rights, Hu Chang, was so angry that his lips trembled as he roared when he saw that the imperial court had turned into a pot of porridge. They were actually acting like commoners on the street. Chapter 197. With this roar, all the officials focused their gazes on him. You are all important officials of the court, yet you are throwing yourselves into chaos like commoners. Where is your decency? Hu Xiao raised his beard and loudly questioned the officials. In terms of age and experience, Hu Kuang had sufficient qualifications. With this shout, many of the officials lowered their heads, not daring to argue with him. But there were also those who did not fear Hu Xiao, such as the Minister of War Yi Ming, who stepped forward with his ceremonial tablet. Minister Hu, could it be that just because Yang Qindong is your grandson-in-law, you are protecting him like this? The Minister of Works, Shi Pu, also stepped forward and said, Minister Hu, now is not the time to be thinking about family ties. That's right. When the country is in danger, we should consider the big picture and put family ties aside. The new Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, also stepped forward and criticized Hu Xiao. After attending court for so many years, Hu Xiao had rarely been attacked by 3 ministers at once. But in the face of this situation, he had no intention of backing down. Instead, he looked at the 3 of them and said with disdain, "Oh? So the 3 of you should know how to fight, right? If that's the case, why didn't you step forward to shoulder the heavy burden when His Majesty was selecting great generals?" The Minister of War Yi Ming blushed at Hu Xiao's words. He knew that he was the one who should step forward to shoulder the burden, but he did not have the confidence to do so. Now that Hu Xiao had said this, he was clearly attacking him. Minister Hu, we are talking about the matter of the Victory Gate opening without attacking. Please don't change the topic, okay? Could it be that Yang Qindong has already surrendered to the Wala, and as his grandfather you will also benefit from it? Is that why you are speaking up for him? Yi Ming's attack touched on what everyone was most worried about. For a moment, the expressions of many officials changed. Even Zhu Qiu, who sat on the dragon throne, turned ghastly pale. If what Minister Yi Ming said was true, then wasn't he handing the capital over to the enemy? Minister Yi, please conduct yourself with dignity. Seeing that the emperor and all the ministers were moved by Yi Ming's words, Hu Xiao roared with a face full of anger. Does Minister Yi have any evidence for what he said? Evidence? Of course not, but why is the city gate open? Yi Ming couldn't help but gloat when he saw Hu Xiao getting angry. Originally, he wasn't even a third-rank official, but because of Zhu Qiu's appreciation, he was given the position of Minister of War and became a second-rank official of the Great Ming Dynasty. But even so, he knew that some of the more experienced old officials still didn't like him. Now he could say that Minister Hu was speechless. In the future, no one would dare to look down on him in court. Hu Xiao was an old official of several dynasties and had seen many storms. How could he be stumped by a new noble Yi Ming? Hearing that the other party had no evidence, he couldn't help but sneer and ask, "Since there is no evidence, Yi Daren's words just now are suspected of framing." The contempt in Hu Xiao's eyes was very obvious when he didn't even call him minister and changed to lord. Yi Ming's face immediately turned ugly when he heard Hu Xiao's words. But before he could think of a counterattack, Hu Xiao continued, During this period of time, who doesn't know that the loyal marquis has bought a lot of property in the capital? Let me ask you, if he didn't have absolute confidence in defending the capital, why would he do this? This might be because he wants to calm the people. Besides, if he has already colluded with Walla, I believe that when the foreign race enters the capital, they won't touch his property, right? Yi Ming didn't know how to answer the question, so he simply gauged the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a petty person. Ah, what a joke. This is simply your excessive conjecture. Presumably, the emperor and the officials already knew what kind of person Walla was. He was simply a group of insatiable people. Just think about it, how could they put away their greed for the sake of others when dealing with such a person? If the loyal marquis wants to be on good terms with Walla, he doesn't need to do this at all. Everyone, don't forget who saved Ingzong from Walla. If he wants to be on good terms with Walla, he doesn't need to do this at all. When Ingzong's name was mentioned, the ministers immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Yes, if Yang Qindong was really such a traitor, he didn't need to do that at all. This reason instantly convinced many people, including acting sect master Zhu Qiu. The loyal marquis saved Ingzong's life, but he didn't go to Nanjing a while ago? I believe everyone can already understand his intentions. This time he's withstanding a huge amount of pressure to fight against a strong enemy. If we still don't trust him, wouldn't it be too disappointing? Hu Chang spoke as if he was fighting for justice for Yang Qindong. In fact, he was also very optimistic about his grandson-in-law. With Hu Zhao's words, the originally excited ministers quickly calmed down. Even Emperor Zhu Qiu was a lot more confident because of these words. He said in the court, "Yes, the loyal marquis is loyal to the great Ming. No one is allowed to say such words in the future. Now let us wait for the good news." Because of Hu Zhao's argument, the debate in the court was finally suppressed. Yang Qindong, who was still unaware of this, was standing on the tower of the Victory Gate at this moment, looking into the distance. He didn't know that Hu Xiao had helped him block the attacks of the ministers, so he could lead the army in the front line at ease. Of course, even without Hu Zhao's help, Yang Qindong wouldn't hand over his military power at this time. It would just cause a lot of trouble. Standing on the tower, the moment he put down the binoculars, he said with a smile to the 4 delicate women in camouflage clothing standing beside him, "You can see now, the Walla cavalry is here." Are they here? Where are they? Hu Xiao and the other women were very excited at this moment. They each held the binoculars hanging around their necks and looked into the distance. Sure enough, there was a burst of smoke and dust, and the Walla cavalry was here. With the competition king as the leader and Xining as the guide, the 10,000 Walla cavalry were rapidly heading toward the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. With so many people looking from a distance, it was really a spectacular sight. Seeing that they were less than 15 li away from the capital, the fast horse scouts in the front line rushed back and reported that the Victory Gate in the capital was wide open. The gate is wide open? What does this mean? The competition king was somewhat at a loss when he heard this news. Logically speaking, if the Great Ming army knew that he was coming, they would either defend the city to the death or flee like crazy. Why did they open the gate? This was inconsistent with the facts. Xining was also confused by this news. He had not been in the capital for so long, so he did not know what had happened here. All he knew was that the Great Ming Dynasty had a situation where 2 emperors ruled together because of Zhu Qiu's ascension. That was all. In Xining's opinion, having 2 emperors ruling together was a good thing. When the power was divided, it gave the Walla army a chance to break through. But now that the gate of the capital was wide open, he could not figure it out. Before he could figure out what was going on, the competition king had already asked him, "Brother Xining, why did the Great Ming Dynasty open the Victory Gate? Could it be that they want to surrender to us?" This, maybe. Xining did not know the reason, so he naturally did not dare to talk nonsense. He could only follow the competition king's words. Xining was just being polite. To put it bluntly, he did not have any ideas. But when the competition king heard his answer, he thought that he had guessed correctly. He was overjoyed and said, "Ha, as expected. The Great Ming Dynasty's army is just a scoundrel. When they know that our elite cavalry is coming, they must be panicking. In order to save their lives, it is possible that they will take the initiative to surrender. In this case, order the army to speed up and try to enter the capital for lunch at noon." Hearing the order, the Walla cavalry was overjoyed and eager to go, but only Xining felt that things were not so simple. However, he really could not think of a reason to do so, so he could only follow the army to the Victory Gate. "They are coming straight to us." On the city gate tower, Hu Yen jumped and said, Then she realized that her performance was a little rude, so she immediately walked to Yang Qindong's side with a red face. Ah! Seeing Hu Yin showing such a cute side, Yang Qindong laughed. He was more proud that the Walla army was coming to the victory gate according to his plan, which was what made him happy. There were only 10,000 city defense soldiers, and they were only a second-line army. Yang Qindong did not dare to have too much hope for them. But the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty was really too big. There were as many as 12 gates that could enter the city. How to concentrate the troops and lure the enemy to attack was the first thing to consider. In order to achieve this goal, Yang Qindong ordered the other 11 gates to be closed, and only the victory gate was opened. Now, it seemed that he had successfully attracted the enemy's troops. It was only a distance of 15 li. In just a few moments, Vala's mighty cavalry appeared outside the victory gate. It was truly an army of more than 10,000 soldiers. Coupled with the fact that they were cavalry, it gave people a sense of grandeur. This kind of battle formation also scared Hu Yin and the other girls. Everything they knew about war was just from hearing about it. They had never seen it like this. For a moment, their bodies trembled because of nervousness. Yang Qindong had already noticed their changes. He walked forward and gave them a big hug. The warm hug quickly calmed them down. Then the sixth young master Yang strode to the front of the city wall. He looked down and saw Xining and the others coming out of the cavalry. Chapter 198. It was originally Xining's idea to take the initiative to come out. In his eyes, the Great Ming Dynasty was already finished. They would only have a bright future if they followed Walla. What he needed to do now was to perform well before everything was set in stone and gain more capital so that he could gain more benefits in the future. That was what he needed to do now. Therefore, when the army was 300 steps away from the gate, he took the initiative to ask to be the vanguard and talk to the Great Ming Empire's garrison to see if they could enter the city without shedding any blood. For Xining's request, the king of competition naturally agreed. When the two armies met, there was already danger. If someone wanted to take the initiative to volunteer, how could he not agree? Therefore, Xining came to the victory gate with 2 Walla cavalry soldiers who were protecting him. Xining, who was riding his horse, looked arrogant, but in fact he was very careful. This could be seen from the fact that he stopped when he was 180 steps away from the gate. He still cherished his life. At that time, the most advanced long-range weapons were firearms and strong bows. However, the effective range of a strong bow was generally about 160 steps. It would lose its original power if it was further away. As for firearms, although they could shoot that far away, they would definitely lose their accuracy. It could be said that 180 steps was a safe distance. Which general is on the gate tower? Can you come out and meet me? I am the vanguard of the Walla army, Xining. As soon as he arrived at the victory gate, Xining's unpleasant voice, which sounded like a male duck's throat, rushed straight to the top of the gate tower. Yang Chengwang was still dressed in cyan. After Xining shouted, Yang Chengwang walked to the gate tower unhurriedly and exposed his body completely. He looked down at Xining and cupped his fists. It turns out to be eunuch Shi. I've been waiting here for a long time. The one who came out was actually Yang Qindong. Xining narrowed his eyes and looked up. Suddenly, a burst of anger rose from the bottom of his heart. His younger brother, Shi Sheng, once had a conflict with Yang Qindong. Not long after that, his younger brother died while performing a mission. Although the report at that time said that his younger brother died because of excessive indulgence in sex with a prostitute called Sai Tianxian, he was unwilling to believe this fact. Shi Sheng could be said to be a veteran in the field of flowers. How could he make such a low-level mistake? His instincts told him that there was something fishy about this matter, and it was very likely that he had been harmed by his enemies. However, because her younger brother and she had offended too many people, it was not easy to find a target. However, he still secretly investigated. Before the results were out, Ying Zong Zhu Qizhen had already sent him to the battlefield, which led to the current situation. Back then, Yang Qindong was one of the people he suspected. Now that he suddenly saw this person reveal himself, how could he remain calm? At that moment he coldly snorted and said, I really can't believe it. Is there no one else in the Great Ming Dynasty? How could they let a brat greet the Walla's army? Xining's words clearly implied something, and also expressed her strong dissatisfaction with Yang Qindong. He said that the 6th young master Yang was too young to take on such a big responsibility. As soon as these words came out, Tiger's Mane and the others, as well as Hu Yen and the other girls, were immediately dissatisfied. As the person involved, Yang Qindong was not angry at this time. On the contrary, he said with a smile, Duke Shi, you flatter me. As the saying goes, the kind of person you are dealing with depends on the kind of person you are dealing with. Just like the Walla who doesn't know what's good for him and doesn't know how to repay kindness, the great Ming dynasty can send the young marquis to deal with him. Hu Yan and the other women covered their mouths and chuckled at his counterattack. First, Xining looked down on Yang Qindong and then she was ridiculed. It was because the Walla was weak that the great Ming dynasty sent the young marquis of loyalty to greet him. The meaning was that the great Ming dynasty would send the kind of person you are. This is called equality. If you look down on Yang Qindong, then you are actually looking down on yourself. This was clearly Yang Qindong giving her a taste of her own medicine. Hu Yan and the other girls who had long known that Lu Lang's words were powerful, how could they not feel sad for Xining at this moment? There were not many people in the world who could win against their husband in a war of words. On the city tower, Yang Qindong's words of sarcasm and even abuse made Xining's face turn red and her eyes widen. But before she could make any counterattack, Yang Qindong continued, "Your body, hair, and skin are from your parents. You don't dare to destroy the beginning of filial piety. If you castrate yourself, how will you have the face to see your parents and relatives when you go to the underworld? This is unfilial. Loyal to the country, you have received the kindness of the great Ming dynasty. You should be a person of the great Ming dynasty. Even if you die, you will be a ghost of the great Ming dynasty. However, in order to survive, you ran to the enemy. This is a cruel and unscrupulous act. This is disloyal. You bully the common people and are greedy. Your parents and family were once common people. Once you gained power, you bullied the weak. This is unbenevolent. For your own selfishness, you actually danced with the wolves and wanted to lead the war to the great Ming dynasty, making the common people homeless and living in misery. This is unrighteous. You are disloyal, unfilial, heartless, and unrighteous people. I don't know how you have the face to live in this world." After a series of hearty and incessant curses, Xining's face became more and more unsightly. She felt as if the blood in her body seemed to be churning endlessly, and in the next moment she would spit it out. Xining's performance was seen by Yang Qindong, but he did not have the slightest intention of stopping. Instead, he raised his voice by a few decibels and continued to shout, "You are a thief. Heaven and earth are witnesses. You are the leader of the thieves." After shouting, Yang Qindong suddenly pointed at Xining with his right hand and said, "If the heavens have eyes, this child should die immediately. He can no longer cause trouble in the world." A bullet flew out, following Yang Qindong's finger, and landed right where Xining's heart was. Xining, who was originally angry, only felt a pain in his chest, and then he lost all feeling. With a plop, he fell from the horse to the ground. Everything happened too fast. When the sniper rifle with a silencer was fired, coupled with Yang Qindong's shout, it did not attract the slightest bit of attention from others. What everyone saw was the scene of Xining falling from the horse and hitting the ground after Yang Qindong asked the heavens. Xining was dead. His body was lying on the ground. It gave people the feeling that even if he died, he could not wash away the sins he had committed. Therefore he could not face others. The two Walla cavalry soldiers who were originally standing beside Xining saw that the person they were protecting was actually cursed to death. They were shocked and immediately turned their horses back. "You are aiding the evildoer. How can the heavens forgive you so easily? Let's die together." Seeing that the fat sheep in his hands was about to escape, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with a sneer. Then he pointed at the two Walla cavalry soldiers who were rushing back. Immediately, the two figures fell from the horse and rolled on the ground twice. After that, there was no sign of life. With 3 finger strikes, 3 people died in succession. This shocking scene shocked everyone. At this time, whether it was the great Ming soldiers on the city tower or the Walla cavalry soldiers below the city, they all looked up at the sky. They seemed to be looking for the place where the gods were. The gods have shown themselves. After the Walla cavalry 3 steps away from the city wall couldn't find the reason, there was a commotion. Many of the cavalry had already reached out and tightened the ropes of their horses. It seemed that they would retreat at any time. "Don't panic, don't panic." The leader of the cavalry was also surprised, but as the vanguard general, he couldn't retreat like this. Otherwise, not only would he be punished by the military law, he was afraid that he would be ridiculed by the other generals when he returned. Under the loud roar, the Walla cavalry gradually calmed down. In order to stabilize the morale of the troops, the leader stretched out his waist and pulled out the scimitar. It seemed that he was ready to attack. "What? Don't you know how to retreat? If that's the case, then stay here." Yang Qindong, who was standing on the city tower, narrowed his eyes. He couldn't let the Walla cavalry charge. Otherwise, it was inevitable that there would be casualties in the chaos. He had to fight this battle beautifully. He couldn't afford any losses. Therefore, when he saw that the leader was about to pull out his scimitar, Yang Qindong pointed his right hand in the air. The leader, who had just raised his scimitar, twisted his body on the horse and fell to his death. Not good, the general fell off his horse. The leader was already shot in the forehead and couldn't be saved. A few of his soldiers wanted to get down from their horses to see what happened. On the city tower, Yang Qindong pointed his finger again. The 5 Walla cavalrymen who had just dismounted fell to the ground one by one and died. Ah, he's really a god. Run. Under the continuous deaths, the Walla cavalry was agitated by the scene in front of them. They were surrounded by a deep sense of fear. It was as if they were afraid that they would be the next one to be pointed at. The cavalrymen in the front row all turned their horses around. The Walla cavalry suddenly became chaotic. With the death of the leader, there was no commanding general and no unified military order. The consequences of this chaos were very serious. Yang Qindong, who was on the victory pavilion, had already predicted this moment. Seeing that the opportunity was here, he decisively said to Sun Tong, "Quick, order General Yang Guang to go out of the city and kill the enemy." Sun Tong was also stunned by Yang Qindong's continuous pointing. At this moment he also had a feeling that it was a god. He was so shocked that he would do whatever Yang Qindong said. He immediately agreed and went to pass on the order. Yang Guang, who was under the victory pavilion, saw the situation outside clearly through the hole in the city wall. He was so shocked that he forgot to chase after the enemy. It wasn't until Sun Tong ran to his side and loudly said that the loyal marquis had ordered to go out of the city and kill the enemy that he recovered. "All cavalrymen, listen to my order. Go out of the city and kill the enemy. Go out of the city and kill the enemy." Many of the soldiers saw Yang Qindong's godlike appearance and their morale was greatly shaken. One by one they waved their scimitars and rushed out of the city gate. Chapter 199. The formation of the Walla cavalry was still in disarray. When they saw countless great Ming cavalry rushing out of the city gates, they became even more flustered. Every single one of them turned on their horses and fled. However, their formation was already in a complete mess. How could they just run away like that? Before the great Ming cavalry could even reach them, they had already trampled over many of their own people. By the time the great Ming cavalry arrived, they were like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves. They only cared about covering their heads and fleeing like rats. No one dared to fight against the great Ming cavalry. This was a one-sided battle. With the death of their general and the loss of their morale, the Walla cavalry was completely routed. In this kind of situation, how could they possibly be a match for the great Ming cavalry whose morale was at its peak? For a time, the situation on the battlefield was completely one-sided. Standing on top of the city gates of the Victory Gate, one could see the Walla cavalry being slaughtered. There were even some Walla cavalry soldiers kneeling on the ground and begging to surrender. The facts proved that there was no army that was undefeatable. As long as one used the right method, they could be defeated and surrendered. Yang Guang waved his large blade and led the charge. Just the number of Walla cavalry soldiers killed by him exceeded 7. Under his leadership, the majority of the great Ming cavalry also managed to kill a few. In the end, they were already 15 li away from the city gates. At this moment, Yang Guang suddenly remembered the words of the loyal marquis. He immediately stopped his horse and gave up on the pursuit. Instead, he turned around and began to clean up the battlefield. Hee. With the situation settled, Yang Qindong revealed a hearty smile. He was in a good mood as he waved at Hu Yan and the others. "Come, let's go back to the immortal abode to eat. Let's go, let's go." Hu Yan and the others didn't show the slightest bit of fear. After seeing the brave side of their husband, the fear in their hearts had long flown beyond the highest heavens. "Marquis Yang, the war isn't over yet." Sun Tong saw that Yang Qindong was about to leave and hurriedly stood in front of him with a pleading expression. "Isn't today's war already over?" "Oh, that's right. You can also bring your subordinates to capture captives now. That's a great contribution. After we clean up the battlefield, we can report to the emperor. As for Marquis, he is a little tired and should go back and rest. When the main force of the Walla arrives, Marquis will appear." After saying this to Sun Tong, Yang Qindong and the 4 madams went back to the Victory Gate. Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Chiu V's first guard team protected him as they gradually disappeared from Sun Tong's sight. Seeing Yang Qindong leave in such a carefree manner, Sun Tong felt a little regretful. He regretted that he did not seize the opportunity to associate with the loyal marquis, and regretted that he sent the information that the city gates were wide open to the emperor. Since the deed had already been done, he could only think of a way to make up for it in the future. As for now, of course, he had to lead the troops to capture the captives. Just as Yang Qindong had said, this was a great contribution. Normally they wouldn't even encounter it, so how could they let it go now that they had encountered it? Sun Tong rushed down the tower with more than 4,000 people and rushed to the front of the Walla cavalry who were kneeling on the ground. The officers and soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office, who originally only bullied the civilians, were now standing upright, as if they had changed into another person. After an hour, the battlefield was cleaned up, and the battle report was also summarized. In one battle, more than 2,000 enemies were killed and more than 5,000 were captured. Yang Qindong's debut finally ended with a great victory. Because Sun Tong was focused on snatching military merits, the throne room did not receive the news immediately. Zhu Qiyu and the ministers were together, waiting for the battle report with a nervous expression. From time to time, the ministers would prick up their ears to listen to the movements outside. However, everything was as usual, and they did not hear any sounds of fighting coming from the city. Since there was no movement, it was good news. The emperor and the officials waited patiently until a eunuch came to report that Deputy Chief Commander Yang Guang and Commander Sun Tong were waiting outside the hall. Zhu Qiyu hurriedly said, "Quickly invite them in." He even used the word, invite. It could be seen that at this moment, Zhu Qiyu was very concerned about the development of the battle, so much so that he did not even care about losing decorum. Yang Guang and Sun Tong, who were wearing heavy armor, strode into the throne room. When they were 20 steps away from the emperor, they took the initiative to stop. Then they half knelt on the ground and said in unison, "Great victory, we have come to offer the captives." Although it was only 2 people's voices, under full confidence, their voices were extremely loud and clear. This voice was like a giant hammer that struck the hearts of the emperor and the ministers. Hua! The emperor and the ministers, who were originally motionless and staring at the 2 people, couldn't help but tense up and then relax. After hearing the 2 people's reports, they were silent for a few seconds, as if they were all digesting this great victory report. How many captives were captured? What was the result of the battle? The Minister of Personnel, Wang Zhi, was worthy of being an old minister. His reaction was extremely fast. While the others were still in shock, he had already asked the key question. In this battle, more than 2,000 enemies were killed, more than 5,000 captives were captured, including Walla's vanguard general, Sai Bian Wang, vanguard Guan Xining and others. 10,000 enemies came, but only 2,000 managed to escape. Yang Guang's voice was still loud. More than 5,000 enemy captives are now outside the imperial palace. Emperor and the ministers, please go and take a look. Sun Tong was not willing to give up and reported the merit. This was also what the 2 of them had discussed on the way here. Since the battle was fought together, of course the merit could not be claimed by one person. In any case, the merit was big enough, so it was not a big deal to have one more person share the burden. In this battle, our army did not have any casualties. We killed the enemy like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. This is all because the emperor is protected by the heavens. This official congratulates the emperor. This official congratulates the emperor. When Sun Tong's words of congratulation came out, the ministers reacted at this time. They collectively kneeled on the ground and shouted loudly and excitedly. In the past, such words were said by the civil officials. The military officials only needed to focus on the battle. Usually, wasn't the reason why they were raised to be used at critical times? As for the merit or not, forget it. Even if they were military officials, it was their responsibility to win the battle. Did you not see Duke Ing Zhangfu's example? When there was a battle, there was limitless glory. When there was no battle, there was all kinds of suspicion and jealousy from the emperor. Even a random eunuch might dare to bully you. In the end, you ended up without a corpse. Sun Tong rushed to say this sentence not because of a whim, but because he had thought about it along the way. Why was it that when he risked his life and had the merit, only those civil officials who were good at talking would get it? He was not convinced, so he took the initiative. Sure enough, taking the initiative to say congratulations to the emperor, Sun Tong attracted a lot of good feelings from Zhu Qiyu. Good, very good. General Yang and General Sun have worked hard. After defeating the Walla army, you will be rewarded according to your merits. Aha, now everyone follow me to see the prisoners. Zhu Qiyu, who was originally nervous and clenched his hands until they turned white, could finally put down his high-hanging heart at this moment. At this moment he was also in a good mood. Laughing loudly, he led the ministers straight to the square outside the imperial palace. On the square, there was a black mass of Walla cavalry in strange clothes kneeling on the ground. They all had their heads lowered, their faces dispirited. Some of them were even trembling slightly to show that their hearts were not calm at this moment, and were even a little scared. It was no wonder that they were so nervous. Previously, when Yang Qindong stretched out his finger at the victory gate, one by one, the Walla cavalry fell to the ground and died. Even their general, the king, died because of this. That scene shocked them so much that they still felt scared when they thought about it. The Walla, who had no culture, were very superstitious. They agreed very much with the saying that the gods had appeared. Since even the gods wanted to help the great Ming Empire, how could they fight this war? Surrendering and atoning for their sins might be able to exchange for the forgiveness of the gods. More than 5,000 Walla cavalrymen knelt on the ground obediently. Although their hands were tied, with their current mentality, even if they weren't tied up, not many of them would have the guts to resist. When Zhu Qiu came here with the ministers, he saw this scene in front of him. Looking at the kneeling Walla cavalry, he couldn't see the end of it. The square, which originally looked very wide, was now very crowded. The great Ming Empire soldiers and the Walla's surrendered soldiers were all over the ground. At this moment, no one doubted Yang Guang and Sun Tong's battle report. They thought that the war should be won, but the result would not be so good. The two generals were exaggerating in order to get military merits. But now it seemed that they were not exaggerating at all. Involuntarily, when the ministers looked at Yang Guang and Sun Tong, their eyes were full of jealousy. People were like this. When in danger, they often thought that it was enough to save their lives, and other worldly possessions could be ignored. But when it was really safe, the thoughts in their hearts would become more and more greedy. This was just a victory, and the Walla's main force had not suffered much damage, but some ministers were thinking about how to get benefits from it. It could be seen that a man who was not content was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. It was not as simple as saying, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. This is caused by Your Majesty's heavenly power. This is enough to prove that Your Majesty is the true Son of Heaven." Eunuch Jining looked at the seemingly countless captive soldiers in front of him. After his eyes rolled around, he suddenly knelt on the ground and shouted loudly, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Your Majesty is the true Son of Heaven." Many ministers who were used to flattering also took the opportunity to kneel on the ground and shouted loudly for the emperor's wisdom. The shouts of the ministers made Zhu Qiu feel like he was floating. At this moment he really thought that he was the emperor recognized by the heavens, and he was the son of the heavens. Otherwise, why was his imperial brother Zhu Qizhen defeated by Walla, and why was Shiheng also defeated by Walla, but only he won? Chapter 200. Ha ha ha, all of this is due to the assistance of all the officials. Zhu Qiu happily distributed the credit to the other officials. For a moment, it attracted endless sounds of gratitude from the officials. However, not all of the officials were shouting that the emperor was the true Son of Heaven. For example, the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao, had always maintained a clear mind. As an old official of several dynasties, he was very clear that the emperor was only the head of the dragons. Otherwise, the court would not be able to be unified and clear. As for who would be the head, it all depended on luck and identity. Just like when Zhu Qizhen was the emperor, didn't these officials also shout that the emperor was wise and that the emperor was the true Son of Heaven? But in reality, after losing the battle, everyone instantly shut their mouths. Now they began to praise Zhu Qiu again. It was really unknown how thick the skin of these people was. However, in the court there were some things that had to be done. If you were too independent, you would only be isolated by the other officials. In that case, it would really be difficult to do anything. However, even if they wanted to flatter, shouldn't they do it more gently? Zhu Qiu had been nervously waiting in the imperial palace. What did the victory of this battle have to do with him? He was somewhat displeased, or perhaps it was because of the unfairness of his grandson-in-law. When everyone was shouting that the emperor was wise and long live the emperor, Hu Shao suddenly said, "Generals, where is the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage? Why is he not here? Did he leave the city to chase the enemy, or was he injured in the battle?" Finally, someone mentioned Yang Qindong. The originally noisy scene instantly quieted down. Hu Zhao's words were like a bright slap to the face, causing many of the officials' faces to turn red. The true hero of this battle should be Yang Qindong without a doubt. However, so much time had passed, yet no one thought of him. This was truly a bit too much. When these words came out, Zhu Qiu's face also turned red. He clearly knew that his performance just now was a bit too much. If it wasn't for Yang Qindong, it would have been difficult to achieve such a great victory. After he knew of the great victory, he didn't think of the person with the greatest merit and instead received the congratulations of the officials. This was truly a bit too much. Fortunately, Hu Shao gave a timely reminder. He also asked, "That's right, why is the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage not here? Why don't we see him?" Zhu Qiu pretended to be anxious for the officials to see. This immediately attracted many of the officials' nods. They all seemed to be praising the emperor's actions towards the meritorious officials, but in reality, only they knew what was going on. Yang Guang and Sun Qindong, the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage. After all, without this person there wouldn't be today's victory, and they wouldn't have had the chance to be in the limelight. However, it seemed to be a little late for the emperor to ask about it now. No matter how, the emperor of loyalty Zhu Guang. Now that he was asked, the two immediately knelt on the ground and replied, "Your Majesty, the loyal Marquis wasn't injured. He only said he was tired and went back to rest." Tired? Resting? Zhu Qiu was confused by this answer. He stood there with a face full of suspicion. Yes, he is indeed tired. The truth is like this. Sun Qindong narrated what happened on the battlefield. From Yang Qindong scolding Xining for being unfaithful, unfilial, heartless, and unjust, he pointed out and Xining died. After that, he pointed out that Xining fell off his horse and died, causing the Walla army to lose morale. Everyone listened to Sun Qindong's narration as if they were listening to a heavenly book. For a moment, everyone's faces tightened. They didn't expect the young Marquis to have such ability. While everyone was still digesting Sun Qindong's words, Minister of War Yi Ming spoke first. "Commander Sun, do you know what you just said? The person standing in front of you is the Emperor, the Son of Heaven. How can you speak without thinking? This subject is not speaking nonsense. What I said is the truth. If you don't believe me, you can ask Commander Yang and all the soldiers who participated in the battle." Sun Qindong heard Yi Ming accuse him of lying and immediately defended himself. A small commander who was only a 6th-grade official dared to contradict a 2nd-grade minister of war. This naturally made Yi Ming's face turn ugly. He secretly made a note of this person and thought that if he had the chance he would definitely teach him a lesson. His gaze fell on Yang Guang. "Vice Commander Yang, tell me what is the truth. Of course, you don't have to be afraid of other people's threats. Just tell the truth. With this minister here, no one will dare to make things difficult for you." Yi Ming said this not to support Yang Qindong, but to guide him to refute Sun Qindong and deny the fact that the greatest contributor in this battle was Yang Qindong. If a minister of war were to question a vice commander, the latter would be scared to the point of wetting his pants. However, Yang Guang, who had just experienced a battle, was full of admiration for Yang Qindong. How could he dare to speak ill of him? He immediately kowtowed to the ground. This general does not dare to speak nonsense. What Commander Sun said is the truth. Wow! As soon as Yang Guang's words fell, the crowd once again exclaimed in surprise. Since the two generals had said the same thing, it seemed that this matter was true. However, how could Yang Qindong kill anyone he pointed at? Could it be that he had some kind of sorcery? Yi Ming stood there with an ugly expression. The two of them were his subordinates in name, but now they dared to refute him in public. It was truly embarrassing. Fortunately, no one's attention was on him, so he didn't lose too much face. After hearing Sun Qindong and Yang Guang's explanation, the officials finally understood why the loyal Marquis was tired and needed a good rest. It was probably because the sorcery he used was too tiring. Of course, some people who knew immediately thought of the mercenaries who had the most advanced firearms. These people only knew that the mercenaries' firearms were very advanced. As for how advanced they were, they didn't know. After hearing what happened on the battlefield today, they had a new view of the matter. Zhu Qiu was naturally one of the people who knew. But the more it was like this, the more worried he was. This advanced firearm could easily take a person's life from 1,000 meters away. If that was the case, didn't it mean that if one day they wanted to deal with him, he would also have nowhere to hide? As soon as this thought appeared, it was like a large stone pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. He even felt a little restless. As the emperor, the thing he was most worried about was that he couldn't control the situation. Then he wouldn't be able to decide the life and death of others. At this moment, the joy of winning the battle was no longer as strong. Instead, it was replaced with a worried expression. Zhu Qiu left first, accompanied by head eunuch Jining. Without the emperor, the officials also lost the mood to celebrate. One by one, they turned and returned to their own residences. With today's victory, they could finally go back and have a good night's sleep. In the imperial palace, Zhu Qiu walked in front with a heavy heart. Behind him, Jining followed step by step. It wasn't until they entered the rear courtyard of the imperial palace and there was no one around that he quickened his pace. He was half a step behind the emperor when he said, "Your Majesty, are you worried about the Marquis of Loyalty?" "Yes." Without anyone else around, Zhu Qiu finally admitted, "The mercenaries' firearms are too advanced. The Marquis of Loyalty has such a good relationship with them. If they..." Zhu Qiu didn't finish his sentence, but he believed that Jining would understand. In a sense, they were grasshoppers on the same rope. Only when his throne was secure could Jining bask in his glory and hold power. How could Jining not understand this logic? With Zhu Qiu around, he was the eunuch Jin that everyone admired. Without this emperor, he would probably die without a burial ground. Since the emperor had worries and hidden dangers, he had to think of a way to deal with them. This subject understands. How about this? I will immediately make a trip to the immortal abode and have a chat with the Marquis of Loyalty. At the same time, I will see if there is an opportunity to get in touch with the general of the mercenaries and reach some kind of agreement with them. Jining reported his thoughts to the emperor. Good. Let's work on both sides. In any case, there must be a result. We will not allow anyone who threatens our safety to exist. Zhu Qiu nodded lightly, his voice carrying a hint of dignity. Immortal abode. When Yang Qindong returned, he had gained a new title, War God. This was probably what it meant to become a god in a single battle. With just a few pointers, he had created his own legend. According to reliable investigations, not a single member of the great Ming Dynasty's army had died in this battle. Only a dozen or so people had been injured in the pursuit because they had been too excited. The achievement of repelling 10,000 enemies with 0 casualties was worthy of this title. This was the benefit of having a weapon that transcended time. It wasn't that the Walla was useless, but rather that the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad's marksmanship was too miraculous. In the Immortal Abode study, Yang Qindong was listening to the report of the Deputy Chief of the Security Bureau, Yang San, with his eyes closed. Summarizing a battle after a battle was an excellent tradition. Even Yang Qindong was no exception. Before this battle, he had already made plans for the worst-case scenario. That was, the Walla cavalry wouldn't stop and would directly attack. If that were the case, the 4 companies of Cold Vanguard lying in ambush outside the Victory Gate would all attack. If that were the case, no one could guarantee that the Cold Vanguard wouldn't suffer any losses in the chaotic battle. After all, their greatest shortcoming was their lack of numbers. If they really did encounter enemies who didn't fear death, how many people could they kill with 400 guns? Fortunately, the Victory Gate had been opened wide, allowing Wang Zhan to fantasize about such a smooth battle. You can't rely on luck in war. This must be conveyed to Commander Lung Song, as well as to the ears of every Cold Vanguard soldier. Yang Qindong heard from Yang Ben that some of the Cold Vanguard soldiers had different opinions about only lying in ambush and not fighting head-on. After saying that the young master was being too careful, his expression became extremely serious. Chapter 201. Yang Qindong didn't blame them for having such thoughts and complaints. After all, they wielded the most advanced weapons in the world and had undergone the strictest training. However, they couldn't afford to be arrogant. Otherwise, they would suffer a setback sooner or later. Since Lung Feng had the intention to underestimate the enemy, they had to correct the situation. Seeing how serious Yang Qindong was, Yang San hurriedly took out a notebook and wrote everything down. He couldn't help but nod his head. This subordinate will immediately go to the courtyard to let everyone know about this and let them know that young master cares about them. At the same time, inform them that the Walla's vanguard has been defeated, but Yes Hen won't let it go so easily. There will be at least one more battle. Tell them to be prepared. Yang Qindong nodded his head in satisfaction. Then he thought of the matter in the imperial court and asked, right after this battle, what are the thoughts of His Majesty and the officials? Has there been any controversy in the imperial court? Young master, this subordinate was just about to report this matter. I just received news from Lord Su Yozhen that not long after you gave the order to open the city gates, the imperial court learned of this matter. After our investigation, we found that it was probably Commander Sun Tong who sent someone to report this news. Because of this, there are people who are slandering the young master, saying that you are colluding with the Walla. The new Minister of War Yiming is the main culprit. The Minister of Revenue Jin Lian and the Minister of Works Shi Pu have spoken up in support of this matter. It was only after Minister Hu Mang stepped in that these rumors were suppressed. Do you think we should do something in private? The situation in the capital isn't stable at the moment, so it's normal for a few people to be missing. Yang San reported while carefully looking at Yang Qindong. He had already made his intentions clear. Since there were people who wanted to deal with the young master, it would be better to strike first and get rid of him. No. Yang Qindong quickly shook his head upon hearing Yang San's thoughts. The great Ming dynasty's problems don't completely originate from the imperial court. These people are just representatives of Confucianism. Even if all the ministers in the court are arrested, there will still be people who will be re-elected. This is simply a problem with the system. There is no end to killing people. Yang Qindong was very clear in his heart. Looking at the history of China, ever since the Han Dynasty revered only Confucianism, the disciples of the Confucian sect were the privileged class, high and mighty. Over the years they had become accustomed to it. They monopolized education and the officialdom. They were corrupt, conservative, and stubborn. However, they were so powerful that even the emperor had to give face to them. Often they would support things that were beneficial to them and oppose things that were not. Yang Qindong's appearance was a threat to them. It was just that the fight had not reached the root of the problem yet, so it had not escalated to the extreme. This was also one of the important reasons why Yang Qindong only developed in the business world. Yang Bao's distribution, immortal abode and sky beyond heaven's hot sales, plus the Yang family's bank that was going to be established soon, gave people the feeling that they were thinking of ways to earn money. In the eyes of the Confucians, they were just stained with the stench of money and could not be brought to the table. In truth, all of this was Yang Qindong's intention. He did not come into contact with other industries in order to avoid direct confrontation with the Confucian faction. What he needed to do was slowly infiltrate. Once he had enough influence, some things would naturally come naturally. But before that, not even the emperor could touch this faction, and those who angered him would not have a good end. Why would he want to provoke them? Yi Ming and the others had only tried to undermine him because they did not want to see him gain too much power and merit. In the end, it was still jealousy at work. This sort of mentality was of no consequence to the overall situation, so there was no need to care too much about it. On the contrary, if he killed them now, anyone who wasn't a fool would be able to see that he was the culprit. That would be tantamount to declaring war on the Confucian sect. He wouldn't do such a thankless thing. Yang Qindong had vetoed the decision to attack Yi Ming and the others, so Yang San knew that the time was not right. He immediately expressed that he would only pay attention to these people in the future, but would not take any action. Yang Qindong was very satisfied with Yang San's timely declaration. Very good. The staff of the Security Bureau have worked hard. How about this, when you go out, go to the chief of Tiger's Mane and get 1 million taels of silver to reward your brothers. Young master, there is still enough silver. Yang San waved his hand, wanting to refuse. In fact, the Security Bureau had never lacked silver. All of this was because Yang Qindong had said that if they wanted to establish an excellent intelligence system, they had to be willing to spend silver. Thus, a steady stream of silver flowed into the Security Bureau. With enough silver, it was much easier to do things with half the effort. Just this treatment alone had attracted the envy and jealousy of many people in the Yang family. However, this matter was requested by Yang Qindong, so even if others had some thoughts, they did not dare to say anything publicly. The Security Bureau was not in the eyes of some of the senior officers of the Yang Consortium's new army, but Yang Qindong's weight and authority were not to be questioned. All right, it's settled then. Go and do your work. Without giving Yang Ben a chance to refuse, Yang Qindong waved his hand and gestured for him to leave. Yang San was touched. He knew that the young master felt sorry for his brothers in the Security Bureau. After all, the members of the Security Bureau were sometimes like mice that could not see the sun. Most of them lived in the dark. In order to keep their identities secret, they could not contact their families, get married, and have children. They had to give up all their youth. Sometimes, in order to obtain important information, they had to work hard for a few months, half a year, or even longer. Giving more silver was one of Yang Qindong's ways of compensating them. Yang San suddenly raised his right hand and gave a standard military salute before leaving the study. Not long after, Tiger's Mane strode in. There were not many people who could come to Yang Qindong's side without reporting. Other than Hu Yen and the other girls, only Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei had such qualifications. Young Master Eunuch Jining is here. He said he brought a new edict from His Majesty. As soon as Tiger's Mane entered the room and saw Yang Qindong leaning against the chair with his eyes closed, he said carefully. Yang Qindong, whose eyes were still closed, acted as if he did not hear Tiger's Mane's words. He asked, Has the 1,000,000 taels of silver been sent to the Security Bureau? Yes, it's been sent. It's the remuneration that His Majesty gave to Lung Feng. That's good. Arrange a side hall. I'll go see Jining. Yang Qindong slowly opened his eyes. After he got up and stretched, his eyes shone with a dazzling luster again. At this moment, Jining had come to see him. Even if he used his toes to think, he would know why. It seemed that Zhu Qiu was not confident. Zhu Qiu was indeed not confident. On one hand, he wanted to use the mercenaries to defeat Walla's great enemy. On the other hand, he was worried that the mercenaries would threaten his safety after their victory. To guard against people and to use people at the same time. Under such contradictory psychology, Jining had come. In the side hall, Yang Qindong and Jining met. After greeting each other, they sat down in their respective seats. Eunuch Jin first praised the loyal Marquis's performance today and even called him a military god. Both the embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards had their own intelligence agencies. Because they had been established for a long time, their strength could not be underestimated. For example, the fact that Yang Qindong was called a military god could not be hidden from Jin Ying's eyes and ears. Haha, Eunuch Jin must be joking. It's all thanks to His Majesty's good fortune, Yang Qindong said modestly with a smile. This battle was won by relying on the advanced firearms of the mercenaries. His Majesty is just someone who spent money. Jining chuckled, but as he spoke he pointed out the crux of the problem. This eunuch was clear about everything. You're just a military god who used advanced firearms. It can't be taken seriously. Moreover, even if the mercenaries were hired, the emperor would be the one paying for it. Your contribution would be even less. Yes, Eunuch Jin's words are very true. Yang Qindong's expression did not change. He did not even have the intention to deny it. For this matter, Zhu Qiu had spent 10,000,000 taels of silver. Although half of it had been in the form of property, it was still wealth. The fact that Yang Qindong had so easily admitted it made Jining feel like he had punched cotton, and his complexion turned rather nasty. When he had come, he had already prepared himself for Yang Qindong to ask for a reward. He had even prepared the words of reprimand so that he could use this opportunity to suppress this marquis of loyalty and valor. But Yang Qindong had no intention of asking for a reward, so what could he do? He couldn't just go and reprimand a meritorious subject without a word. If he did that, he would be going too far. After all, the main force of the Walla had yet to arrive at the capital. If he got rid of the donkey after it had left the millstone and he couldn't deal with the mercenaries, wouldn't the capital be in danger? He could not bear such a heavy responsibility. Yang Qindong's low profile and modesty had ruined Jin Ying's plans. But Jining had followed several emperors, so he was able to react quickly. He looked at Yang Qindong and said, Marquis of loyalty and valor, His Majesty is extremely satisfied with the performance of the mercenaries in this battle. He ordered this duke to reward the mercenaries no matter what. The imperial kitchen has prepared a lot of food for this occasion. Marquis Yang, why don't you tell them so that they can make things easier for you? At the very least, His Majesty should act as a host. Listening to Jin Ying's words, Yang Qindong knew that Jining still wanted to go around him and get in touch with the mercenaries. Since this was the case and they had prepared delicious food, how could he not take advantage of this opportunity? If he could save on the immortal abode's food, why not? He smiled and said, all right, since it's His Majesty's wish, this marquis will send someone to accompany Jin Gonggong to the mercenary camp's courtyard. Chapter 202. Yang Qindong was so cooperative. Not only did he agree, but he also did not go personally. This greatly exceeded Jin Ying's expectations. He had originally thought that even if he agreed, he would go along and reap the benefits. Of course, Yang Qindong would not go with them. This was what Jining wanted to see. He did not stand on ceremony. In that case, I'll have to trouble you, Duke of Loyalty. Haha, no problem, no problem. Seeing that Jining did not invite him to go with them, Yang Qindong looked at him with annoyance. He could even imagine that once Zhu Qiu really contacted the mercenaries, she would immediately kick him out. She might even find a crime to confiscate his family property. This was the scheming of an emperor. Sometimes, the emperor would turn hostile and refuse to acknowledge the other party's kindness. However, no matter how much Zhu Qiu calculated, he would never have thought that the real mastermind behind the mercenaries was Yang Qindong. His methods would be useless in the end. In fact, it was not just Zhu Qiu. None of the old foxes in the imperial court would have thought that the mercenaries, who had such advanced firearms, would have anything to do with a young man who was not even 20 years old. It was precisely because no one could guess that Yang Qindong did not cause everyone to boycott him in advance. Jining left happily. Tiger's Mane followed Yang Qindong's orders and accompanied him to the courtyard of the mercenaries' barracks. Yang Qindong had mentioned this when he met with Commander Lung Song and the others yesterday. Once they won the battle and displayed their great strength, the Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty would certainly think of a way to contact them and deepen their relationship. This was something that would be difficult to avoid. Instead of thinking of all sorts of ways and excuses to avoid it, it was better to meet them openly. In any case, there would be no promises. On the contrary, there would be some benefits. Why not? Jining did not know about this. He only knew that if he had the chance to meet with the mercenaries alone, as long as he could establish a good relationship with them and make them work for him, it would infinitely increase his authority. In this way, even in front of the Emperor Zhu Qiu, he would be able to speak with more confidence. Led by Tiger's Man, Jining brought a group of embroidered uniform guards and a young eunuch from the palace to the courtyard of the mercenaries' military camp. With Yang Qindong's previous instructions, the group naturally entered without a hitch. Here Jining met the leader of the mercenaries for the first time, Lung Song, whom the soldiers addressed as commander. Although she didn't know what the commander's official title was, seeing how respectful the others were towards Lung Song, Jining's intuition told her that there would only be benefits and no harm in getting closer to this person. Immediately, his face bloomed like a flower as he quickly stepped forward and took the initiative to greet Lung Song. Commander Lung is indeed a man of striking appearance. You are young and promising. You truly make me envious. As soon as he arrived in front of Lung Song, he listened to everything that was good. Lung Song, who had long been prepared and had a certain understanding of eunuchs, said with a straight face, "Are you the leader of the eunuchs by the great Ming Emperor's side? Very good, since the items have been delivered, you may leave." Lung Song's expression was so resolute and cold that Jinying's expression changed after hearing it. What kind of person was he? He was Zhu Qiu's favorite. To put it bluntly, if he didn't like anyone now, he only needed to say a word in front of Dai Zong. Even if that person didn't die, they would lose a layer of skin. Other people couldn't wait to curry favor with him. Who would dare to speak to him in such a tone? However, Lung Song had done so, and yet he still didn't have the slightest bit of temper. He didn't dare to show Lung Song any displeasure, and he didn't even dare to say a single harsh word. This made Jinying's heart tighten. However, he was someone who was used to being a eunuch. He had suffered many grievances, so the speed at which he stabilized his state of mind was still very fast. After adjusting his state of mind, he looked at Lung Song and said with the same smile, "Commander Lung, I am here on behalf of the great Ming Emperor to thank you all. Sending these foods is merely a small token of our sincerity. My Emperor's intention is for me to come and see if there is anything lacking here. If you have any requests, feel free to ask." Jining appeared to be very heroic. As long as they could rope in mercenaries, they felt that paying a certain price was necessary and worth it. Jining even had a bold idea, and that was to use mercenaries to deal with Zhu Qizhen of Ying sect and complete the great matter of the great Ming dynasty's unification. Lung Song silently looked at Jining. The sixth young master was truly a godly person. 2 days ago he had already guessed that after winning the battle, Zhu Qizhen of Ying sect would spend money to rope him in. Wasn't this happening now? Since such a good thing had been delivered to him, how could he not accept it? Lung Song, who had been very cold, suddenly smiled. In Jinying's eyes, this smile was like 100 flowers blooming. It actually made him feel as if his heart was bursting with joy. Eunuch Jin is too polite. Since this is the case, how much can the great Ming Emperor give us if we lack copper and iron? He actually made a request. Jining was overjoyed. He knew that this was very likely a way to strengthen the bond between him and the mercenaries. Not to mention copper and iron, as long as the great Ming dynasty had it, they probably wouldn't be stingy in the slightest. Well said, well said. The mercenaries have helped us defend against foreign enemies, so you are our best friends. Whatever you need, we will find a way to satisfy you. Since Jining had agreed so readily, Lung Song naturally had to express his gratitude. He laughed heartily and invited the other party into the depths of the barracks. On the surface, the relationship between the two sides seemed to be quickly warming up. Jining and Lung Song took this opportunity to get to know each other better, and reached a certain consensus. When he left, Jinying's face was filled with excitement, as if an old tree had just bloomed. When the other junior eunuchs saw this, they felt an inexplicable sense of fear. They seemed to have seen eunuch Jining regain his manly vigor. He was probably going to find them at any time to have some fun. There were many times when the world of eunuchs was unknown to outsiders, and they couldn't understand it. Perverted people often had many perverted methods, and these methods were often used to make senior eunuchs happy, while the junior eunuchs had nothing left to live for. Not long after Jining left, an inconspicuous man dressed as a woodcutter walked out from the rear courtyard of the barracks, heading straight for the immortal abode. No one knew that this inconspicuous man was a secret agent from the security bureau. He wanted to report the details of Lung Song and Jin Ying's conversation to the sixth young master. In the palace, Jining was delighted to see Zhu Qiu. She then truthfully reported to Zhu Qiu what she had discussed with Commander Lung. Your Majesty, this subject has already found out that the headquarters of the mercenaries are at sea, on a large ship. They don't have a fixed residence and will go wherever they are needed. Most of the mercenaries are from the Great Ming Dynasty, but because they can't survive under the harsh governance of the local officials, they have no choice but to take the risk and seek a living at sea. Jining proudly told Zhu Qiu everything she knew about the mercenaries. Those corrupt officials. When Zhu Qiu heard this, his face was filled with anger. For such talented people to be chased out of the country, those local officials were the sinners of the country. Yes, corrupt officials should be killed. But if it weren't for their actions, these people would only be decent soldiers at best. Without advanced firearms, they would be no different from the ordinary soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty. Through her understanding of Zhu Qiu over the past few days, Jining had more or less seen through him. This emperor was the type who had great ambitions. He truly wanted to become a famous ruler and strengthen the Great Ming Dynasty. However, some things couldn't be changed by one's will. If he truly wanted to revive the Great Ming Dynasty, there were still too many things that needed to be done. How to strengthen the Great Ming Dynasty was a grand goal to begin with. It was difficult to explain in a short amount of time. Jining wanted to talk about the problem at hand, so Guqing continued, Your Majesty, it's because of the advanced firearms that these mercenaries possess undefeatable battle prowess. From chatting with Commander Lung Song, this subject found out that it was because the loyal Marquis had unintentionally made a business deal with them that he gained their basic trust. For example, most of the goods sold in heavens beyond heaven were provided by the mercenaries. After Yang Qindong obtained them, he sold them at a high price to the merchants and commoners of the Great Ming Dynasty. Speaking of which, he's the blood-sucking one of the most corrupt officials. That's right. Although the loyal Marquis is young, his ambitions aren't small. This person isn't easy to get along with. If there's an opportunity in the future, we have to think of a way to get rid of him. Zhu Qiu nodded in agreement. Ever since he ascended the throne, Yang Qindong had been demanding things from him. He didn't behave like a subject should. It was precisely because Yang Qindong protected his imperial brother Zhu Qizhen that the Great Ming Dynasty was suddenly split into two halves. Although he did contribute to the defense of the capital this time, how much money did he get from the Great Ming Dynasty's treasury and how much imperial property? A subject who profited from the country's war was truly infuriating and deserved to be killed. If it weren't for the fact that the defense of the capital was imminent, in a fit of anger, he might have already issued a decree to kill Yang Qindong. Seeing that the emperor was full of loathing for the loyal Marquis, Jining Nai felt a burst of joy in his heart. This was exactly what he wanted. Yang Qindong's wealth and influence were simply too tempting. If he could get rid of this person, the profits would definitely not be small. Most importantly, if he got rid of this person, he would be able to privately contact the mercenaries and become the link and bridge between them and the Great Ming Dynasty's commerce. At that time, would he still have to worry about a steady flow of money? Yes, Your Majesty is right. However, these are all trivial matters at the moment. How to maintain a close relationship with the mercenaries is the most important thing. This subject thinks like this. First, we need to get closer to each other so that they won't have any ideas about us. Second, we need to make them work for us. With their support and assistance, it won't be difficult to drive away Walla or defeat Ingzone. We can even buy a large number of advanced firearms from them. It won't be impossible for us to expand our territory and strengthen our Great Ming. Chapter 203. Zhu Qiu's blood surged when he heard Jin Ying's words. Wasn't this person talking about his life goal? When he heard that he could buy a large amount of advanced firearms from the mercenaries, he became even more excited. Beloved official, are they really willing to sell such advanced firearms to us? Zhu Qiu couldn't be blamed for asking this question. The mercenaries' strength lay in their advanced firearms. If everyone used the same level of weapons, the Great Ming Dynasty, which had sufficient soldiers, could destroy the mercenaries in minutes. Selling one's foundation to others was a short-sighted action. Zhu Qiu didn't think that this matter was very feasible. It's possible. Your Majesty, to be honest, this subject also thought that it was impossible. However, when Commander Ling mentioned that he needed a large amount of copper and iron, this subject casually mentioned that Your Majesty was very interested in the advanced firearms in their hands. Unexpectedly, Commander Ling agreed on the spot that as long as we could provide them with the materials they needed, he would personally gift us an advanced firearm as a tribute to Your Majesty. As for the need for more firearms, he would need to return to the sea and report to his leader before he could make a decision. When Jining said this, he was eloquent and eloquent. From the looks of it, he was clearly trying to show off his achievements. Is that really possible? That's great. This way we can give them as much copper and iron as they need as long as we have them in our national treasury. Although we can only get one first, we have a lot of skilled craftsmen in the Great Ming Dynasty. So, we will be able to imitate them very soon. At that time we will be able to sweep the world, ha ha ha. Zhu Qiu's brain reacted very quickly. At this moment he seemed to be able to see many advanced firearms at his disposal and the scene of him conquering the world. Yes, this subject understands. Seeing that Zhu Qiu had agreed, Jining also sighed in relief. Previously, he had agreed to the other party's request for copper and iron without asking the emperor for permission. He was afraid that he would be blamed. Now it seemed that he didn't need to worry. But then again, in order to obtain an advanced firearm and the friendship of the mercenaries, the price they had paid this time was too great. Just the copper and iron alone was promised to be 1,000,000 tons. This was already 3/5 of the amount in the Great Ming Dynasty's national treasury, and it had been accumulated since the time when they became ancestors. Looking at it this way, the capital they paid was too much. But when he thought about the friendship between the two countries and an advanced firearm, it seemed to be worth it. Immortal abode. The information from the Security Bureau was sent to Yang Qindong. Haha, very good, it's done. In the study, Yang Qindong's joyful laughter could be heard. There were a lot of science and technology books stored in the warehouse. They were supposed to be distributed to the troops for them to study. Now Yang Qindong took out a portion of it and gave it to the researchers in Crimson City. Those people were originally 1 in 1,000 talents. Now that they had the materials they could learn from, they could do things with half the effort. The development of the city was changing day by day. With ready-made firearms and detailed books, it was not difficult for him to not improve. The only thing that hindered its development was the lack of raw materials. For this matter, Yang Qindong had even made preparations to attack the Japanese Empire. As everyone knew, the Japanese Empire was located in the middle of the ocean and was made up of several islands. Because of its special geographical location, they had a lot of gold and steel mines. These were the things that Yangtze needed to develop. However, the Ryukyu kingdom had not been completely stabilized. If he sent troops to the Japanese Empire now, he would feel that he was stretched thin, which was why it had not taken shape yet. In the end, there was too little time, and the number of troops in Yang Xie's army was too small. Since he could not immediately attack the Japanese Empire, Yang Qindong had to reconsider where he could get more copper and iron for Crimson City's development. After thinking about it, his target was still the Great Ming Dynasty. He wondered if he could use Zhu Qiu's eagerness to make a fuss. Lung Song did not disappoint. After negotiating with Jining, he managed to get 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron. With these things, it could be imagined that the problem of Crimson City's raw materials had been temporarily solved. How could he not be happy? As for whether or not the Great Ming Dynasty would replicate the advanced firearms, Yang Qindong was not too worried. Even with a ready-made firearm, it would take a long time to replicate it. When that time came, who knew what the situation would be like? Who knew? Who knew? Without the corresponding books and guidance of others, who knew how long it would take to create a new firearm just by relying on a finished product? Who knew how many Dieters there would be? As for what could be done with this advanced firearm, without the corresponding bullets, it was just a decoration and could not threaten anyone. The important thing was that he had obtained 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron. Moreover, Zhu Qiu had personally agreed to it. Even if it was shipped out of the capital to the sea, it would still be justified. Just as he was thinking about how Jining had helped him greatly, more intelligence from the Security Bureau arrived. It was an intelligence report on the Walla's army. It had to be said that the Walla cavalry was truly an elite force. Not only did they charge quickly, they also fled quickly. It had not been long since the battle in the morning, but their deserters had already retreated 300 li and found the main force of the Walla's army. According to the intelligence report, The Walla's army only had 60,000 soldiers, but it was said to be 200,000. After reorganizing the vanguard that had escaped, they were rapidly marching toward the capital. Of the 50,000 soldiers, there were 40,000 cavalry and 10,000 infantry. It had to be said that the steppe truly was rich in healthy horses. In this aspect the great Ming dynasty could not compare. In the absence of modern chariots, Yang Qindong was also considering building a cavalry team. He had even prepared a candidate. It was a young man named Windchaser. This person had lived on the steppe since he was young and was extremely familiar with horses. Even more amazing was that he even understood horse language and could communicate with healthy horses in an extremely short amount of time. With such talent he should have been able to do well on the steppe. However, fate played a little joke on him. Because his mother was quite beautiful, the leader of the local tribe took a fancy to her. First he killed his father, then he took his mother by force, forcing his staunch mother to die on the spot. At the time, Zhui Feng was only 12 years old. In a fit of rage he killed the leader and took revenge for his parents. Then he rode a healthy horse and fled to the Central Plains. After fleeing for 6 years, he coincidentally joined the Yang Xie's new army. A while ago Zhui Feng had already passed the strict test of the Cold Front and was approved by the commander Lung Song to bring the 9 Cold Front members back to the steppe. He used his status as the squad leader to gather information and secretly accumulate strength. The matter of Zhui Feng only flashed through his mind. The main force of the Walla was already here. How to deal with them was the problem that Yang Qindong needed to consider. With the death of the vanguard army's journal king, he was afraid that they would not listen to his orders to set up a formation in front of the city and wait for his roll call. It was very likely that when the city gates opened, they would all rush into the city. If that was the case, it would be difficult to control the situation with just the 400 Cold Front members. Therefore, not letting the enemy enter the city was a prerequisite. Defending the city did not satisfy Yang Qindong. He needed to attack and not passively defend. The great Ming dynasty could not allow the Mongol tribes to bully them. If they could only defend when they were at their doorstep, this was definitely a disgrace. Take the initiative to attack and kill our way out. This thought quickly flashed through Yang Qindong's mind. He got up and went next door. There, Tiger's Mane and the others had already set up a reconstruction sand table based on the information from the Security Bureau. Striding in front of the sand table, Yang Qindong's gaze swept across the table. One plan after another was quickly formed or rejected. Gradually, the battle plan became more and more mature. Walla Army Camp. After attacking for an entire night, it could be said that the men and horses were tired. Most of the soldiers were resting in their tents. However, as the leader, Yesen could not sleep. He was holding an impromptu meeting with his generals to consider the upcoming battle with the great Ming dynasty. Participating in the meeting was his other brother, Borimo, the general's grandfather, and other tall Mongol warriors with a valiant aura. Everyone, the news of the Journal King's defeat and death should be known to everyone. What do you think? As the de facto leader of Walla, Yesen had a dignified aura. Compared to the great Ming dynasty, the people of Walla acted more rudely and directly. As soon as Yesen finished speaking, the general's grandfather took the initiative to stand up and loudly said, "Leader, we have the world's fastest horses and superb riding and archery skills. We only need to rush into the great Ming dynasty's capital. With our warriors, who can stop us? As for the periodical king being killed, I think he simply wanted to imitate the Han people and hold a meeting before the battle. This gave the other side the opportunity to be attacked by our unknown hidden weapons. It's nothing to worry about." The general's grandfather was a famous warrior in Walla. He was known for his extraordinary strength and superb archery skills. After many military achievements, he was favored by Yesen. Naturally, when he spoke, there was no need to worry so much. Yes, we only need to kill with our army. At that time, no matter what the other side has, they will not be able to succeed. Facing Emperor Ingzong's 500,000 troops, we can win. Now there are only 10,000 enemies. It is not enough to worry about. After the general's grandfather took the lead, the other generals also shouted loudly and expressed their opinions. Chapter 204. These generals were mostly brave warriors. Perhaps they wouldn't have any problems fighting on the battlefield, but when it came to strategizing, they were far too lacking. Yesen lightly shook his head. He wasn't as straightforward as the other Mongolians. Instead, he was a cunning Walla leader, as cunning as a rabbit. During the Battle of the Tumu Fortress, it was because of his cautiousness and caution that they were able to achieve a great victory. Since the periodical king had already been defeated and even died, he naturally wouldn't recklessly advance. He wasn't very satisfied with the words of these martial artists. Instead, he turned his gaze to his younger brother, Borromeo. Borromeo and the periodical king were both Yeshen's younger brothers. However, their personalities were completely different. The latter was fond of grandiose achievements and liked to take everything for granted. However, he was a man of few words and usually gave off a gloomy feeling. It wasn't that Borromeo wasn't good at talking. On the contrary, he was a person who planned before taking action. He was used to observing others and then making the most correct decision based on everyone's performance. However, those who were good at observing others generally had very accurate intuition. When he felt Yeshen's gaze on him, his expression became serious. Elder brother, this subject brother also thinks that General Nigong and the others are right. Our current advantage is that we have a strong army. As long as we take a steady approach, taking down the Great Ming's capital will be just around the corner. How do we take a steady approach? Yeshen, who valued his younger brother's opinion very much, asked. In the words of the Han people, it's called step by step. Obviously, Borromeo had already thought of a countermeasure. When his elder brother asked, he gave the answer without hesitation. Step by step? Yeshen was very interested in this idea. Tell me in detail. Yes. In fact, the method is very simple. In order to prevent the Great Ming's defeat from happening to us, we can take a divided approach. That is, one army will be at the front, one army in the middle, and one army will be at the back. This way, no matter which army is attacked, we can look after each other and support each other. If we don't encounter any attacks along the way, we will enter the Great Ming Dynasty's capital in batches. Remember, don't learn from the king of magazines. Don't stop, just focus on attacking. If there's really a problem, just turn around and retreat. The army behind you will naturally support you. Not bad, not bad. Yeshen nodded in agreement when he heard Borromeo's opinion. By dividing the army into 3 groups, it was guaranteed that no matter what went wrong, Walla's main force would still be there, and the army would not be completely wiped out. Yeshen laughed heartily when he realized the benefits of the art of war. Alright, we'll do as you say. How about this? General Nigong will take 10,000 men as the vanguard, that child Borromeo will take 20,000 men as the center, and this chief will bring up the rear to ensure everyone's safety. Yes. After receiving the order, the generals placed their right hands in front of their chests and saluted Yeshen. There was a change in the strategy. The Walla army that was supposed to arrive at the capital at dusk on the second day did not arrive as scheduled. On the contrary, the Security Bureau personnel sent out ran until 3 horses died and sent back important news. The Walla army was actually advancing toward the capital in 3 groups. In the mercenary compound, Yang Qindong, Commander Lung Song, and the others were waiting for news from the front lines. This time, the main force of the Walla army was coming. It would be very difficult to use the previous method of naming to deal with them. This time it would be a hard battle of saber against saber, spear against spear. Emperor Zhu Qiu had already sent people to inquire about the situation more than once. Even eunuch Jining had taken the initiative to come once. Because of Yang Qindong's presence, he left after a brief exchange of greetings. Lung Song had told him before that it was best not to let the loyalty marquis know about their deal. Otherwise, based on the fact that this person had an extremely good relationship with the leader of the mercenaries, it was very likely that he would interfere and ruin the plan. Of course, this was Yang Qindong's idea. Even his cooperation with Zhu Qiu had to be as mysterious as possible. In his view, the more mysterious something was, the more people would believe it was real and would not be suspicious. As expected, Jining listened to Lung Song's words. When he saw Yang Qindong here, he took the initiative to leave. Before leaving, he gave Lung Song a look that only the 2 of them could understand. Yang Qindong had seen this out of the corner of his eye, but he still pretended not to see it. While everyone was waiting, the Security Bureau finally sent back news. When they learned that the Walla army had not gathered together and had instead divided into 3 groups, Yang Qindong wanted to throw his head back and laugh. Previously, he had been worried that the Tile army would launch a collective attack. If that was the case, with the 10,000 Great Ming soldiers under his command and the 400 Cold Vanguard soldiers, it would truly be difficult to ensure the safety of the 12 gates of the capital. As for going out to look for opportunities, the difference in numbers was too great. It was difficult to say whether they could protect themselves and annihilate the enemy. Since he was leading the army into battle, if he only wanted to win, his expectations were too low. What Yang Qindong wanted was a complete victory. He wanted to obtain the greatest victory with the least losses. It was indeed very difficult to achieve this. However, now that the Walla had taken the initiative to divide their forces, the situation was completely different. After dividing their forces, the Walla's advantage in numbers was gone. Yang Qindong could fight according to his plans. He strode to the sand table and looked at the three-dimensional map that was almost engraved in his mind twice with his bright eyes. He suddenly pointed at a place called Willow Town and said, "It's here. Let's encircle the enemy and attack the reinforcements." Encircle the enemy and attack the reinforcements? Lung Song and the others were all excited when they heard this. Their eyes flashed. Yang Qindong had once introduced encircling the enemy and attacking the reinforcements in the tactical learning class. This was an effective method to annihilate the enemy. It would only be used when the enemy's numbers exceeded a certain level. When everyone was still thinking about the essence of encircling the enemy and attacking the reinforcements, Yang Qindong took a pointer and pointed at the sand table and said, "Everyone look, this place is called Willow Town. The local people call it Willow Ditch. There is only one main road in the town that runs from east to west. The north and south sides are filled with huge ditches. There was a heavy rain a while ago, so there should be a lot of water in the ditches. Immediately send people there. If the ditches in the north and south are filled, immediately inform the people there to evacuate." With a resolute voice, Yang Qindong gave the military order. At the same time, Tiger's Mane had already walked out of the meeting room and arranged for fast horses to investigate the situation in Willow Town. "When the scouts come back with the specific information, we will hold a meeting overnight and then make preparations overnight. We have less than 24 hours to prepare. I hope everyone will be alert." Yang Qindong's gaze swept across Lung Song, Xiaofeng, Tingshan, Wu Sheng and the others. Yes. Everyone's bodies quickly tensed up and stood at attention. At the same time their eyes lit up. Generals were never afraid of war. Although they also hoped for world peace, their mission made them never shrink back when war came. In their hearts they even hoped to achieve great things on the battlefield. The scouts left the city in the night. Now that the 5 city warden departments were under Yang Qindong's command, it was very easy to send people out of the city. 4 hours later, the fast horses came back from Willow Town, which was 30 li away. They reported that the ditches were filled with water, and that the ditches were 2 zhang wide and 1 zhang deep. "Inform Vice Commander Yang Qindong and the 5 commanders to come here for a meeting." Hearing that the situation was as he had expected, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with determination. Not long after the order was given, Yang Guang's group of 6 arrived at the mercenaries' courtyard. This was the first time they had walked in here, so they were a bit nervous. After all, to the outside world this army was too mysterious. It was so mysterious that even they did not know much about it. The dark night added a bit of mystery to the courtyard. The 6 people followed the torches that led them to the meeting room, so they did not see their surroundings clearly. When they entered the brightly lit meeting room, the 6 people lost their ability to observe their surroundings. All of this was because Yang Qindong, dressed in green, was standing in front of them. Ever since the previous time when he completely defeated Walla's vanguard, Yang Qindong had the title of War God. He enjoyed a very high status and influence in the army. After this matter, Tao Jin, Yang Jie, Mao Fusho and Gao Li all regretted it. They originally thought that with a war on the horizon, staying in the capital to maintain law and order was a very safe job. If the situation turned bad, they could immediately escape from the capital. But who would have thought that the defeated Great Ming army would be able to display such power in the hands of the loyal Marquis? This was great. They had defeated the enemy effortlessly and obtained military merits, but they didn't get any credit at all. Their hearts were extremely unbalanced, so they made up their minds that they would participate in the next war no matter what. When they saw Yang Qindong, a feeling of respect naturally flowed out from the bottom of their hearts. "You're all here." Looking at Yang Guang's group of 6, Yang Qindong nodded slightly. His gaze then landed on Tao Jin's group of 4 as he asked, "Everyone, the battle is imminent. It's better if you each lead some men to guard the city and maintain law and order." No. When Tao Jin's group of 4 heard that they were going to be excluded again, how could they be willing? They immediately shook their heads like a rattle drum, and their faces instantly became very ugly. "So you're saying that you want to participate in the war?" Yang Qindong asked with a surprised expression. In fact, this result was already within his expectations. Since there were benefits, who would stand by and do nothing? Chapter 205. Yes, we want to join the war. Tao Jin and the other 3 held their chests high, as if they were using their actions to tell Yang Qindong that they were men, and they were also the young generals of the 5 cities warden's office. Seeing that the 4 of them were so determined, Yang Qindong nodded his head. Since you want to join the war, Marquis can agree to it. But there is one thing that needs to be emphasized. On the battlefield, no matter who it is, they must obey military orders. If anyone disobeys, they will be punished by military law and beheaded without mercy. Yang Qindong spoke seriously, but Tao Jin and the other 4 were even more serious. They nodded their heads solemnly, indicating that they would listen to Yang Qindong's orders and arrangements. Since that is the case, come over, I will announce the battle plan. Yang Qindong turned around and walked towards the sand table. He held a pointer in his hand and pointed at the sand table as he spoke of the battle situation and issued orders. According to the scouts, Walla's army is divided into 3 groups and is heading towards the capital. The first group is a vanguard of 10,000 cavalry, led by General Walla's grandfather. Marquis has seriously studied this man. He is a man who is not afraid of death. His personality is straightforward and he kills without blinking an eye on the battlefield. But usually this kind of person will not beat around the bush. If Marquis did not guess wrongly, he will definitely take the shortest route to the capital tomorrow. Then Willow Town will be his only route. Willow Town, there is only one road from east to west. There are more than 2,000 people and more than 500 families in the town. The south and north of the town are surrounded by 2 ditches that are 2 zhang wide and 1 zhang deep respectively. It can be said that once we enter the town, as long as we block both ends, there will be no other way out. And what we need to do is to block them here. Tingshan, Taojin, Gaoli, where are you? We are here. The 3 people who were called out stepped forward and came in front of Yang Qindong. Marquis ordered that Tao Jin and Gao Li each take 1,000 soldiers. Tingshan, take 100 men from your 3rd company and set up a defense at the exit of Willow Town. Remember, your mission is to block the enemy here and not allow them to advance even an inch. At that time, you may be able to suppress the enemy's charge with long-range shots. Yang Jie and Mao Fusho, each of you will lead 1,000 men and cooperate with Xiaofeng's company of 100 men. When you see Walla's vanguard cavalry enter Willow Gully, you will immediately close the gap. This will restrict a portion of the enemy's forces and reduce the pressure on our allies. At the same time, you must prevent the enemy from breaking out from here. Sun Tong, take 1,000 men and cooperate with 4th Company Commander Wu Sheng. Wait for Walla's main force, which is that child Borromeo's troops, to send reinforcements to Nigong. No matter how fierce the attack is, you must not take a step back. When Xiaofeng, Yang Jie and Mao Fusho stabilize the situation, they will come to support you. No need, we can handle it. Wu Sheng stepped forward confidently. He looked as if he could complete his mission and didn't need anyone's help. It's good to be confident, but don't feel too much pressure. Also, when you can't hold on any longer, there will be orders for you. At that time, you can retreat to the side and open up a path for that child Borromeo. Let him enter Willow Gully and become a turtle in a jar just like grandfather. Yang Qindong was very satisfied with Wu Sheng's performance. As a soldier, one must have the spirit of fighting for the sake of thousands of people. Otherwise, one wouldn't be an outstanding soldier. After patting Wu Sheng's shoulder and having him back down, Yang Qindong's gaze fell on Lung Song and Yang Guang, who hadn't been named yet. Your mission is to restrict Walla's leader, Yes Hen. No matter what, you can't let them advance too smoothly. Yes Hen is a very cunning and suspicious person. As long as he senses danger, he naturally won't recklessly advance. Once the time is right, I'll give the order. All you need to do is lead the army and charge over. When that time comes, you'll have done a great service. Yes, Lung Song and Yang Guang confidently replied. They had absolute faith in Yang Qindong. Since this was his order, it naturally couldn't be wrong. Okay, the order has been given. Is there anyone else who doesn't understand? If there isn't, immediately return to the armory and get a strong bow. Remember, other than cavalry, don't even think about engaging in close combat with the enemy. Just attack from afar. After assigning all the tasks, Yang Qindong calmly waved his hand. Although his blood was boiling at this moment as a commander, he still needed to maintain his cool. This sort of performance would play a vital role in calming the soldiers. With this order, the army immediately began to get busy. What should have been a peaceful night in the capital was now bustling with activity. The army needed to prepare for battle and leave the city. Such an important matter had to be reported to the emperor and approved. Yang Qindong gave this task to Sun Tong. Marquis Yang, this general really didn't do it on purpose. When eunuch Jin sent someone to find me, I truly had no other choice. Sun Tong saw that Yang Qindong had given him this task and hurriedly tried to explain. He did not want to offend Yang Qindong because of this, as this would only bring him benefits. It's fine. Marquis knows of your difficulties and can understand. There's no need to think too much about it. Yang Qindong had a smile on his face, but it was just a formal smile. No one knew what he was thinking behind this smile. No, Marquis Yang, this general truly admires you. I have already regretted what I did before. This time please send someone else. Sun Tong kept shaking his head as if he wanted to express his determination. Yang Qindong stepped forward and placed a hand on Sun Tong's shoulder as he chuckled. Okay, Marquis understands your intentions. How about this? You still need to report. This time it is Marquis who has asked you to go. It will be different from last time. This smile was much more sincere than before, and Sun Tong immediately nodded in understanding. Although one did not have a very high position in the Five Cities Warden's office, one still needed to be smooth and slick in dealing with people, and one also needed to be smart. Satisfied, Sun Tong left and headed straight for the Imperial Palace. Not long after, Jining heard the news and met with Sun Tong. She heard about Yang Qindong's plans and determination for this battle. Is the main force of Walla's army coming? Commander Sun, what do you think are our chances of winning this time? Jining did not know much about the battlefield. He did not even know where Willow Town was. However, he was better than Wang Zhen in that he would not casually interfere in things he did not know. For example, when it came to military matters he did not understand, so he would ask for the opinions of others. I am not very sure either, but looking at the Marquis of Loyalty, he should be very confident. At this moment we should choose to believe in him. Sun Tong did not dare to directly express his admiration for Yang Qindong, so he changed the way he spoke. Yes, we should believe in him. How about this? I will immediately report this matter to the Emperor. You wait for the tiger tally. Jining nodded and told Sun Tong to wait where he was. He then went to the back of the palace to find the Emperor. It had to be said that Zhu Qiu was very diligent. He had not yet slept and was still reading some books that the Emperor must read. When Jining went forward and said that Yang Qindong was going to lead the army out of the city to fight Walla, his expression became somewhat nervous. Has Walla's main force arrived so soon? I wonder if the Marquis of Loyalty has made preparations. Your Majesty, with the help of the mercenaries, I think there will be no problem. Commander Sun Tong of the Warden's Office of the Five Cities has come to ask for your opinion and ask for the Tiger Tally to lead the army out of the city. Your Majesty, what do you think? Jining asked carefully. The political power of the Ming Dynasty was actually composed of civil and military officials, eunuchs, and the embroidered uniform guards. According to the rules of the past, when the army went out to war, there must be an accompanying eunuch to supervise the army. Only then would the emperor be at ease. However, this obviously did not work for Yang Qindong. Last time, he had refused to accompany the emperor, and the emperor had also agreed. If they were to send an eunuch this time, would the other party think too much? However, if there were no eunuchs accompanying him, if he handed over the tiger tally so easily, the emperor would not even have the strength to fight back once he had other thoughts. What are you looking at? Since the Marquis of Loyalty is going to deal with Walla's army, just give him the tiger tally. Don't worry, Yang Qindong is the youngest son of Lord Yang Rong. He won't do anything to me. Zhu Qiu clearly saw Jin Ying's worry. However, he had his own plans. In his opinion, Yang Qindong was a little unique in his way of doing things, but he should not have any thoughts about the throne. Otherwise, when he saved Dingzong, he could have held the emperor hostage and ordered his vassals. However, he did not do so. Now he would not do something like rebelling. Since the emperor had said so, Jining could only nod and agree. However, for safety's sake, he still said, Your Majesty, why don't I personally go and see how the Marquis of Loyalty is preparing? Is there anything I can help with? That's good. Then you can go. Zhu Qiu thought that sending Jining was a form of attaching importance to him, so he nodded and agreed. Following Sun Tong, Jining arrived at the courtyard where the mercenaries were stationed. When he saw Lung Song here, he merely nodded as a greeting. This was what the two of them had discussed before. In front of Yang Qindong, they would try their best to pretend that they were not familiar with each other to confuse him. How could he know that this was just Yang Qindong's idea? He wanted to give Jining hope and let him feel that he had a chance. This way, the mercenaries and himself would be safe and they would be able to reap more benefits. Marquis of Loyalty, is the army going to fight Walla? After entering the meeting room, Jining asked knowingly. That's right. It has already been arranged. "We're just waiting for your Majesty's tiger tally." Yang Qindong nodded and directly asked for the tiger tally. He had no intention of explaining the battle plan to Jining. Chapter 206. It was one thing for Yang Qindong to not have eunuchs as supervisors when he led troops into battle, but he couldn't even be bothered to explain the battle plan. This made Jinying's expression turn ugly. "Duke of Loyalty, how are we going to deal with the Walla this time? Do you have a chance of winning?" Jining kept asking for the battle plan. Although it was no longer a secret, Jining had the right to know. If he knew, it was the same as the emperor knowing. But Yang Qindong couldn't be bothered to waste words with him. He still remembered that before he returned, it was this man who had ordered the brocade guards to attack Yangjia village. Yang Qindong didn't settle the score with him because he cared about the big picture. But it didn't mean that he would still speak nicely with him. Thus, in front of Yang Guang, Sun Tong and the others, he turned around and said, "This marquis has spoken for an entire night, and my mouth is already dry. If eunuch Jin wants to know the specific situation, you can ask someone else." Yang Guang, Sun Tong, and the others' expressions changed when they saw him reject Jining in front of everyone. This was the head eunuch of the ceremony directorate, the favorite of the emperor. Wasn't Yang Qindong afraid that Jining would hold a grudge against him and settle the score later? Tao Jin and the others couldn't help but lower their heads, indicating that they wanted to draw a clear line with Yang Qindong. Yang Guang stood unmoving. Sun Tong looked conflicted and hesitant. But in the end, he raised his head and looked at Jinying's deflated expression. Yang Qindong took in everyone's expressions out of the corner of his eye. Then his gaze landed on Jining. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. His smile was playful. At this moment, Jining was furious. Ever since Zhu Qiyu had come to power, no one had dared to speak to him like this. Even the current emperor would talk to him in a negotiating tone when he encountered something. However, Yang Qindong actually dared to openly oppose him. This was simply challenging his authority. Jining was furious, but on the surface she did not show any signs of anger. Instead, she laughed and said, "Fine. Since the emperor has handed over military power to the Marquis of Loyalty, there should not be any problems. In that case, this duke will congratulate the army in advance on their triumphant return. This is the tiger tally. This duke still has to go back and report to His Majesty, so I won't stay any longer. Farewell." After saying that, Jining turned around and left. No matter how one looked at it, her footsteps were somewhat unsteady. It was clear that she was extremely angry. But at the same time, he still had a backup plan in his heart, which was that he did not know the details of the battle plan. If they lost the battle, it would have nothing to do with him. At that time, he could use this as an excuse to punish Yang Qindong. What Jining didn't know was that Yang Qindong would give her this opportunity. Because of Yang Qindong's attitude towards Jining, the atmosphere in the meeting room was extremely tense. Yang Qindong acted as if he didn't see it and said, "All right, go do whatever you need to do. The tiger tally has already arrived. The army will set off in an hour." Yang Guang, Sun Tong and the others quickly left. They needed to collect their weapons. It would take some time to gather their men. Lung Song and the others all stayed behind. Each of them only brought a company of soldiers so they could be called to battle at any time. Without any outsiders, everyone's spirits were much more relaxed. Lung Song also carefully came to Yang Qindong's side and said, "Young master, Jining is quite angry with you, but I don't know why she did this. Didn't you say that the group of eunuchs could always influence the great Ming Emperor's thoughts?" This was not only Lung Song's confusion, but also everyone's confusion. Even Tiger's Mane, who had been by Yang Qindong's side all this time, had a puzzled expression. These days, the sixth young master had been polite to everyone. Why did he suddenly turn hostile tonight? Seeing everyone's confusion, Yang Qindong laughed loudly and said, "You don't have to worry about the young master's safety. With you all here, who would dare to touch this young master? As for tonight's actions, they were originally intentional. I wanted to show my dislike for Jining and let the world know that this young master doesn't like the group of eunuchs." "Why is that?" everyone asked again in confusion. The people's hearts. Yang Qindong pondered for a moment and didn't answer immediately. Instead, he paused for a moment before spitting out these two words. Ever since the defeat of the Tumu fortress, everyone knew that the eunuchs had ruined the great Ming dynasty's plans. They had caused so many soldiers to die tragically on the battlefield, and so many officials to die without even leaving behind their corpses. This caused the common people and some officials to hate the eunuchs to the bone. Yang Qindong didn't give Jining any face and did it in front of so many people. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before this matter spread out. Even if these people didn't say anything, they would use the security bureau to spread the news. In this way, everyone would know that the loyal Marquis wasn't afraid of the eunuchs. This was tantamount to giving everyone a glimmer of hope. Letting those people who hated the eunuchs to the bone find a leader would allow him to win the hearts of the army and the people in a very short period of time. These might not be of much use in the political struggles of the upper echelons. But once it was time to explode, it would definitely be a force that couldn't be underestimated. Yang Qindong's goal was to replace the great Ming dynasty peacefully. The hearts of the army and the people were the most important issues to be resolved. As for the officials and eunuchs, as long as they were given enough benefits, they wouldn't be a problem. This was the true reason why Yang Qindong didn't give Jining any face. In the end, he was setting up a trap. It was just that he had set it up too early so others couldn't see its effects. He only mentioned the people's hearts and didn't give any further explanation. Yang Qindong looked at Lung Song and the others and said, "This battle concerns the safety of the great Ming dynasty's capital and the image of this young master. Do you have the confidence to win this battle?" "Yes." Lung Song and the others stood at attention, their faces full of confidence as they replied. "Very good. Since that's the case, you can go and make your preparations. Lung Song, stay behind." Yang Qindong waved his hand at everyone. Xiao Feng, Ting Shan, Wu Sheng, and the others quickly left to mobilize the people before the battle. Lung Song, who was left behind, looked at his young master expectantly. "Let's go. The two of us will leave the city first. There are some things that need to be arranged in advance." Looking at Lung Song, Yang Qindong smiled confidently. He wouldn't tell others that he had a large warehouse. He could take out many heavy weapons at any time. Thus, he left Lung Song alone to make arrangements for this matter. The old man had an impatient personality. Ever since he received the order from Yes Hen, he had been rushing toward the great Ming dynasty's capital without stopping. In just one day he had arrived at Willow Town, which was 30 li away from the capital. "General, we've been hurrying along the way. Both men and horses are tired. Should we rest here for the night first? When the sun rises tomorrow morning, we'll go straight to the great Ming dynasty's capital." A trusted aide looked at the lit villages and towns in front of him and suggested. The grandfather shook his head and arrogantly said, "There's no need. Let's rest in the town first, and then we'll launch a night assault on the capital. We'll catch the enemy by surprise." Ha ha ha, the merit will definitely go to this general. Since he had taken the role of the vanguard, he naturally had to make achievements. Otherwise, wouldn't he be ridiculed by others? As for the success rate of the night attack on the great Ming dynasty's capital, he didn't consider it at all. In the Battle of the Tumu Fortress, what he saw was the scene of the defeated army of the great Ming dynasty being killed and captured in groups. At this moment, he didn't put the strength of the great Ming dynasty's army in his eyes at all. In order to reach the great Ming dynasty's capital as soon as possible, the old man entered Willow Town as Yang Qindong expected. If it were other generals, in order to reduce unnecessary trouble, when they encountered an enemy town, they might be able to take a detour and not directly attack. But because of the Battle of Tumu Fortress, the Wala cavalry had long been arrogant. They didn't even put the elite army of the great Ming dynasty in their eyes, so how could they take the ordinary people of a town seriously? On the contrary, when they entered the town they could burn, kill and loot. How exciting and satisfying was that? However, when they really entered Willow Town, the situation was beyond their expectations. Although every house in the whole village was lit, they couldn't see a single person. When they broke in, they didn't find the existence of a living person, not even a chicken, duck, or goose. When the old man who received the report of the battle heard that this was an uninhabited town, he sneered and said, "I didn't expect the great Ming dynasty to play the scorched earth game with us. It's just that their calculations are wrong. We didn't consume too much on the way here. Even if we can't replenish for a while, it doesn't matter. It's just that this method is really annoying. Come, inform everyone to eat some dry food here. After half an hour the army will set off." General Nai Gong didn't take the empty town in front of him seriously. This was a complete display of his arrogance. If it were any other general who was on guard, they would probably think carefully about why such a thing would happen. At least they wouldn't rest so comfortably in this town. Of course, General Nai Gong was also a brave general who had led troops for many years. During the rest time he didn't forget to send scouts to the front to inquire about information. But he didn't know that the scouts he sent out were destined to not return. They had completed their mission of going to the underworld to inquire about information. Naigong's army stopped in Willow Town and didn't leave. This gave Xiaofeng, Yang Jie and Mao Fusho enough time to prepare. Seeing that the enemy had entered the encirclement, the 2,100 people quickly set up a defensive line on the west side of Willow Town. Each of them drew their bows and prepared to block the enemy's retreat. While Xiaofeng and the others were still preparing at the east exit of Willow Town, Tingshan had already begun his journey to harvest lives. Chapter 207. Xiaofeng, Tao Jin, Gao Li, and the other 2,100 soldiers were the first to enter the battlefield. With sufficient time, they even dug a simple trench for the soldiers to hide in. Just as they finished everything, the sky began to darken. Not long after, the sounds of people chattering could be heard in the distance. This was the sound of Walla's vanguard troops entering Willow Town. The enemy was right in front of them. In an instant, the 2,000 soldiers of the warden's office became very nervous. Some of the soldiers who were participating in a battle for the first time had their palms sweating profusely to express the anxiety in their hearts. This was how they should behave when they were on the battlefield for the first time. For some people, even if it was their second time on the battlefield, they would still be nervous. However, after 100 battles, they would no longer be nervous when they saw the battlefield. Instead, they would be excited. In contrast, the 100 soldiers led by Tingshan were very calm. They first used sharp military shovels to dig a hole in the ground to ensure that they could hide their bodies well. Then, they set up the 95 style in their hands and aimed the crosshairs at the only exit from Willow Town that led to the capital. None of the 100 or so people spoke, nor did they make any extra noise. They gave off the feeling of ghosts in the night. Other than a faint shadow, nothing else could be seen. The lifelessness of the Lung Feng soldiers shocked the surrounding 2,000 soldiers of the warden's office. Among them, there were some people who were quite skilled and thought that they were great. However, when they compared themselves, they realized that the gap between them and the soldiers was huge. Not long after the soldiers finished their preparations, 3 war horses rushed out of the town and headed straight for the formation they had set up. From the looks of it, they were all lightly dressed. There was no doubt that they were scouts. Position 1, Position 2, Position 3, get ready to fire. Positions 4, 5, 6, and 6, prepare to fire at any time. Seeing the 3 enemy scouts charging towards his formation, Tingshan Company commander, who was leading the formation, only took a glance before losing interest. There were only 3 people and they were not even enough to fill the gaps between the teeth. He could just hand them over to 3 soldiers. The 3 people who were named immediately became excited. This was a kind of glory, but at the same time, it was also a kind of test. Didn't you see that Company Commander Tingshan had arranged for other people to take the last shot at any time? If he really missed, he would lose face and the limelight would be stolen by others. If that happened, he wouldn't even be able to find a place to cry. The 3 soldiers closed their right eyes and aimed at the 3 moving targets with their left eyes. Their breathing gradually stabilized, and their right index fingers gently placed on the trigger, preparing for shooting. Fight. When he estimated that the 3 enemy scouts were only 150 steps away from him, Tingshan softly spat out a word. Then 3 gunshots were heard. Bang, bang, bang. On the opposite side, 3 Walla scouts fell off their horses at the same time. F***CK. When the 3 of them fell off their horses, the warriors in positions 4, 5 and 6 cursed at the same time. This had nothing to do with quality. It was all because they didn't have the chance to shoot. It was just another kind of complaint. Looking at the warriors in positions 1, 2 and 3, they were all in high spirits. They almost laughed out loud when they saw that they had hit the target. At the same time, the soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty who were with them all widened their eyes in disbelief at this moment. The scene just now deeply stimulated them. They couldn't believe that a battle could be fought like this. From a distance of 150 steps in the dark, they could still accurately hit the enemy. What kind of method was this? Thinking about how they could fight side by side with such an army, the officials of the 5 cities warden's office began to feel confident. Originally, they thought that it would be very difficult or even impossible to stop the enemy's cavalry of 10,000 with only 2,000 soldiers. As for the 100 mercenaries, they didn't take them seriously at all. What could such a small number of people do? However, when the truth was in front of them, they knew that they were wrong, very wrong. They were afraid that the combat power of these 100 mercenaries would not be much worse than the 2,000 of them. The 3 gunshots sounded so ear-piercing in the quiet night. Walla's army in Willow Town quickly moved. The general in charge of the town immediately shouted to his trusted aide, "It seems to be the sound of firearms. Go and see what happened." Although he suspected that it was the sound of firearms, the arrogant general still didn't think that the great Ming army would have the courage to come out of the city and fight with him. They had received intelligence that although many of the nearby great Ming dynasty guards were sending reinforcements to the capital, distant water couldn't quench the immediate thirst. There were only 10,000 soldiers in the capital, and most of them were second-rate soldiers. They were very easy to deal with. Such an army wouldn't have the courage to come out of the city and provoke him. However, thinking was one thing and reality was another. Not long after the general sent people to patrol the situation, another round of gunshots sounded. Then, in the small courtyard where he was resting, a trusted aide ran over with a nervous expression. General, we found a large number of great Ming army outside the town." They used firearms and strong bows to kill dozens of our warriors. The trusted aide fell in front of the general and said in a panic, "What? Great Ming army?" When he heard that there were great Ming army here, Walla was stunned for a moment. Then he laughed heartily, very good, very good. This general thought that he would only start a massacre when he entered the capital. I didn't expect that he would deliver himself to my doorstep so quickly. Very good, pass down the order. Warriors, get on your horses and charge with this general. It was just firearms and strong bows. The general really didn't put them in his eyes. Not to mention that accuracy was not good in the dark of the night. Even if it was daytime, he had 10,000 cavalry. Why would he fear the great Ming army? Whether it was firearms or strong bows, there was a limit to how far they could shoot. There was also a time difference when controlling them. With this, the Walla cavalry could charge forward. As long as they charged into the enemy's camp, it would be time for them to start a massacre and rampage on the battlefield. The general was very confident. Not only that, his Walla cavalry didn't take the great Ming army in front of them seriously. Along the way they had seen too many useless great Ming soldiers. There was no one who could scare them. As expected of the elite cavalry, they quickly gathered together. However, because the road to the east of Willow Town was not wide, it was not suitable for a large number of cavalry to charge forward. Thus, the general personally picked 500 cavalry and let them be the vanguard of the vanguard to charge forward. No matter how much damage they suffered, they had to charge to the enemy's formation and create enough time for the rear troops to charge forward. The 500 cavalry obeyed the order and left. Like a gust of wind, they charged out of Willow Town and headed straight for the great Ming army camp. At this moment, Ting Shan and the soldiers of the 3rd Company were looking forward with bright eyes. They were ready to fire at any time. Beside them, the 2,000 great Ming soldiers led by Tao Jin and Gao Li also pulled their bows and were ready to shoot at any time. After shooting down the first 3 Vol scouts, the enemy had launched another wave of attacks. More than 30 of them had been wiped out by the mercenaries from afar. Although the Ming army had released some arrows during this period of time, they all knew that it was just to scare people. None of the Watts cavalry had been killed by the arrows. After being robbed twice in a row, Tao Jin and the others also wanted to perform well this time. Thus they gave the order early on. As long as the enemy cavalry entered the range of the shooting range, they did not need to wait for orders and could shoot arrows to kill the enemy. In the dark night they were waiting with a net. At this moment the air was filled with a kind of solidification factor, causing everyone's breathing to become heavier. The originally cold night was filled with a warm atmosphere. Within their sight, they could hear the sound of horse hooves coming from afar. Because there were too many cavalry, the ground was trembling because of it, causing every soldier's face to be filled with a dignified aura. They're coming out. In the hope and expectation, a large number of strong horses rushed out of Willow Town. There were also bursts of shouts and shouts. Those were the Walla warriors riding their horses. They wanted to rush forward at the fastest speed and kill the great Ming army. Prepare to shoot. The moment they saw the cavalry rush out of the town, Ting Shan, who was leading the team, gave the order to the soldiers of the 3rd Company. The distance of 500 steps was far beyond the effective range of the Type 95, which was 600 to 800 meters. If he gave the order to shoot now, it would be difficult for the bullets to hurt the enemy. However, this did not prevent him from giving the order to shoot. As long as the soldiers felt that they could kill the enemy, they could deal with it themselves. Every soldier carried a basic magazine, 300 bullets, to ensure that when fighting the Walla cavalry, the enemy would not be able to break through the defense line because of the lack of ammunition. Commander Ting Shan gave the order, and the momentum of the 100 soldiers of the Cold Vanguard suddenly changed. A powerful murderous aura spread out from their bodies. In the end, it formed a substantial cold air, causing the great Ming soldiers who were closer to them to feel a burst of coldness. Eo yo ho! The Walla cavalry made a charging sound that belonged to their race. Under the command of their masters, the strong horses quickly closed the distance between the two sides. 350 steps. 300 steps. 250 steps. They had already reached the effective range of the Type 95, but the soldiers of the 3rd Company did not shoot. It was obvious that their usual training was effective. Due to the lack of raw materials such as copper and iron in the arsenal of Crimson City, when the instructor taught the Cold Vanguard soldiers, the most common sentence was to save ammunition and try to shoot every bullet into the enemy's chest instead of shooting randomly. Chapter 208. Even though Lung Feng had brought enough ammo this time, he didn't want to waste any bullets. He gripped his gun tightly and stared ahead like an eagle, thinking about the best time to fire. 230 steps, 220 steps, 200 steps. When they reached 200 paces, which was the effective distance of 300 meters, the sound of gunfire suddenly became louder. In the dark night, it was as if a meteor shower had streaked across the sky, directly pouring down on the bodies of the Walla cavalry that was surging forward. Under the dazzling light of the fire, the Walla cavalry, who seemed to have seen hope, experienced what it meant to be in hell, and experienced what it meant to have nothing to live for, to have no hope in life. When the powerful bullets spun out of the barrel and drilled into their bodies in less than half a breath, many of the Walla cavalry were killed on their horses before they could even understand what was happening. Perhaps because the charging speed was too fast, many of the cavalrymen were already dead, but their bodies were still charging forward. Only after 2 or 3 breaths did they fall off their horses with a plop. Even when they died, they probably didn't understand what had killed them. The 100 Cold Vanguard soldiers followed what they had learned in their training, firing in a staggered formation. It was as if they had set up a net of fire, wiping out all of the Walla cavalry within the range of 200 to 150 steps. In short, other than the war horses, none of the Walla cavalry could get within 150 steps. This distance of 150 steps became an insurmountable barrier in front of the Walla cavalry. Behind the 100 Walla cavalry were Tao Jin and Gao Li's 2 soldiers from the 5 cities warden's office. Originally, they thought that this would be a tragic battle, and some of the soldiers were already prepared to die for a righteous cause. But when they saw the Walla cavalry's sudden burst of power and the situation stabilized, they knew that this was not a battle but a massacre. That's right, a massacre. Not a single one of the cavalrymen was able to get within 150 paces. At such a distance, even if they wanted to shoot arrows, they wouldn't be able to reach the effective range and wouldn't be able to do any damage. The Walla cavalry's crossbows could not shoot over, and the 2,000 soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty could not shoot either. This scene caused Tao Jin and Gao Li's hearts to burn with anxiety. They were here to gain merit, not to be spectators. They wanted to kill the enemy, but the distance that a strong bow could shoot was limited. Even if they shot from such a long distance, they would still lose their accuracy. There was no difference between shooting and not shooting. Commanders, if you really don't have anything else to do, just bring some people to bring back YLA's healthy horses. These are all good things. Whether it's offered to the imperial court or sold to merchants, they are all military merits and silver. Ting Shan noticed the anxious mood of the 2 Great Ming Dynasty commanders behind him, so he gave them a suggestion. The strong horses were in front. Without their owners, more and more of them gathered and began to hinder the Walla cavalry's shooting targets. If these strong horses could be moved away, it could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Tao Jin and Gao Li, who were originally worried that they had nothing to do, immediately smiled. Okay, we will immediately organize people to steal the horses. Oh no. Just to pick up the horses, hee. Since there was military merit and money to be obtained, and there was not much danger to their lives, why wouldn't they do such a good thing? At this moment, under the command of the 2 commanders, groups of Great Ming soldiers rushed forward under the moonlight and brought the tall and strong horses back to their camp. They also cleared the obstacles in front of the Walla cavalry to ensure that they could have a clear line of sight. At the same time, there were no obstacles after the bullets were shot, so they could better kill the Walla cavalry. In Willow Town, 1,000 Walla cavalry were sent out, but not a single one returned. Another 1,000 Walla cavalry rushed out, but only less than 200 people escaped. The results that were sent back made General Nai Gong turn pale with fright. He couldn't understand when the firearms of the Great Ming Dynasty became so powerful that they could also play a role in sealing off the night. It was not that they had never dealt with the firearms of the Great Ming Dynasty before. In the past, when Zhu Di was still alive, he took them to the grasslands to commit crimes. In the beginning they were indeed intimidated by the firearms that could emit smoke and shoot iron bullets. But after many bloody battles, they also found out the shortcomings of the firearms. That was, they could only shoot one shot at a time. After that, it would take a long time to reload. When it was used again, the accuracy was extremely poor. It was far better to use a strong bow. Over time, such things no longer scared the Walla people. Only they dared to risk their lives and sacrifice themselves. They could break through the firearms of the Great Ming Dynasty by paying a small price. After that, they could do whatever they wanted. How could it be like this time? 2 echelons of 2,000 people rushed out, but only 1/10 of them returned. What the hell is going on? Who can give me an explanation? Seeing that they had lost nearly 1/5 of their forces without killing a single enemy, General Nai Gong angrily roared at his subordinates. All the Walla generals lowered their originally arrogant heads deeply. They also couldn't figure out what was going on. They couldn't understand why the Great Ming army, which was originally weak, became so powerful that they suffered such a big loss. No one answered his question. General Nai Gong's emotions couldn't be vented. He was even angrier. Just as he was about to use the saddle to teach these disappointing subordinates a lesson, suddenly, a burst of gunshots came from the west side of Willow Town. It was like many firecrackers were set off. What's going on? The sudden sound scared General Nai Gong. He looked at the burst of fire coming from the west side of the town and asked angrily. Just as the words left his mouth, a young general quickly ran in front of General Nai Gong and knelt on the ground. General, a large number of Great Ming soldiers suddenly rushed in behind us. We were careless for a moment and more than 500 people were killed or injured. This was a Walla Chiliarch who was in charge of covering the rear. Usually his task was the simplest and safest. He was only responsible for checking if there were any soldiers who escaped because of the battle. But today they were suddenly attacked. They were completely unprepared and were caught off guard. Half of the soldiers died on the spot. The rest reacted faster and escaped into the town. General Nai Gong was in a fit of anger. When he heard the Kiliarcha's words, he stretched out his right hand and grabbed the Kiliarcha's collar and pulled it in front of his face. What did you say? The Great Ming army attacked us from behind? How many people are there? I can't see clearly. It's too dark. The Chiliarch shook his head with an innocent expression. He couldn't be blamed for answering like this. It was really too dark. In addition, he was unprepared. When the gunshots rang out, a large number of his brothers fell to the ground. He only cared about running for his life. How could he have the time to see how many enemies were there? The Kiliarcha's answer made General Nai Gong throw him to the ground angrily. Then he shouted to the other troops, "Who dares to lead the troops to the back and see what happened?" General Nai Gong in Willow Town was stunned. He originally thought that he was the one who took the initiative to attack. But reality told him that the Great Ming army was prepared. Now that he was the one who was attacked, how could he not be angry? Among the young generals, there was a brave Chiliarch who took the initiative to lead his troops to the west side of Willow Town. But when cold weapons faced the 9.5 spear that had a shooting range of nearly 400 steps, the result was obvious. After leaving behind a few hundred corpses, the slow ones all retreated. At this point, an unbelievable result was placed in front of everyone. General Nai Gong's troops were surrounded in Willow Town, which was not very big. East side of town. Ting Shan looked at the gunshots and flames coming from the west side of town. He was furious. Xiaofeng UF** King Bastard. It was no wonder that Ting Shan was so angry. According to the previous plan, only when they were facing the crazy attacks of the Walla cavalry would they send out a red signal to the sky. At that time, Xiaofeng's first company would poke the Walla cavalry from the back to distract them. At the same time they would also reduce the pressure on their side. But now Xiaofeng did not even wait for his signal. He directly poked the Walla vanguard from the back. How could Ting Shan not be angry? He was not satisfied with the fight yet. But the reality was already like this. Even if he was angry, there was nothing he could do. Ting Shan could only look at the east side of Willow Town, hoping that there would be more Walla cavalry who were not afraid of death. Maybe it was because the heavens knew the hope in his heart. A large number of cavalry rushed out from the east side of town, and there were still many of them. Using the shadows under the moonlight, A rough calculation showed that there were at least more Walla cavalry than the last time. Ah, very good. This grandfather is to my liking. He knows what the battalion commander likes and wants to die. Brothers of the 3rd Company, listen up. Check your guns and ammo. Make preparations before shooting. Seeing that the enemy did not show any intention of retreating because of Xiaofeng's actions, Ting Shan changed his frowning expression and laughed out loud. The 3rd Company's cold vanguard members were originally angry because Xiaofeng's 1st Company didn't keep their promise. However, when they suddenly saw that the enemy still charged out, all of their faces lit up with joy. They quickly checked the 95 shots and replaced it with a new magazine. Why did the Walla army still rush out when they knew that the Ming army was blocking them from the east side? This had a lot to do with their commander, General Naigong. Knowing that they were surrounded, General Naigong was not afraid. He knew that the Ming army only had about 10,000 people. He originally thought that they were waiting for him at the east side. If he wanted to rush over, it would be difficult. But the Ming army actually took the initiative to split into two. Wasn't this the same as splitting their limited forces? Even so, how many enemies could there be in the front? If he did not rush now, when would he? When he broke through the front line, wouldn't the capital of the great Ming dynasty be an undefended empty city? Wouldn't he be able to take it? Chapter 209. Naigong thought that he had seen through the weakness of the Ming army. Thus, he gathered 3,000 cavalrymen and had them charge out from the front. 3,000 Walla cavalrymen surged forward. From afar they looked intimidating. At the very least, the Ming army led by Tao Jin and Gao Li trembled in fear. However, Ting Shan, who did not care about all this, had the opposite expression. His eyes were wide open as he looked forward. He waited for the enemy to enter the predetermined distance before he started shooting. Without needing anyone to give the order, all the Lung Feng soldiers started firing when they estimated that the enemy cavalry had entered their effective shooting range. Similarly, a dense net of fire enveloped the front. The cold vanguard soldiers guarding the center even switched their guns to burst mode. Often, a small group of cavalry would fall to the ground together with their horses after a burst of bullets. Naturally, this method of fighting could not kill one person with one shot. However, it had an absolute deterrent effect and disrupted the charging formation of the enemy cavalry. Under the dense gunfire, at least 1,000 Walla cavalrymen were killed in the charging path. However, this also bought them a distance of more than 100 steps. Just as they were getting closer and closer to the Lung Feng soldiers and were less than 40 steps away, grenades rained down on them like rain. Then a series of deafening sounds rang out. Following that, people shouted and horses neighed non-stop. A series of powerful grenades were thrown and completely shattered the enemy's fighting spirit. At the same time, countless people died. Those who were still alive immediately retreated. They no longer had the courage to charge. Phew! Tao Jin and Gao Li let out a long sigh. It had to be said that their performance just now was a little too weak. When they saw the enemy rushing in front of them, they actually forgot that they were still holding strong bows in their hands and could only watch helplessly as the enemy got closer and closer. Their legs began to go soft and their bodies began to tremble. It could be imagined that if the Lung Feng soldiers were not the main force in this battle, these 2,000 Ming soldiers would have been defeated. If they were not captured, they would have been killed. It could be said that these Ming soldiers had not received proper training for too long. They had forgotten what the battlefield was like. They had forgotten that a life-and-death battle relied on courage. Fortunately, the Lung Feng made a move at the crucial moment. He used the powerful grenades to destroy the enemy's morale and won another victory. Another attack had failed. The old man in the town was not discouraged. Instead, he patted his head as if he had suddenly realized something. It's all my fault. It turns out that the Ming army's main force is right in front. It seems like their weak point is behind us. Come on, gather the rest of the troops and charge out with me. After knowing that it was impossible to attack from the front, Naigong immediately changed his strategy and decided to leave the town from the west. He thought that he was very adaptable, but in fact he was just adding fuel to the fire. However, as the person in the game, Naigong had no idea. With the order, the remaining 6,000 Walla cavalrymen quickly gathered. However, because the path out of the city was not wide enough, only 1,000 cavalrymen could charge out at a time. As the leading general, Naigong took the initiative to stand in the third echelon, which was the third group to charge out. In Naigong's eyes, standing here was undoubtedly very safe. Once the first two factions had used up all their firearms, it would be time for him to go on a killing spree and show off his might. However, would that really be the case? Xiao Feng, along with Yang Jie and Mao Fushou's 2,000 Ming soldiers, was destined to teach Nai Gong a lesson. Everyone be careful. In a moment, the Walla cavalry might charge out from the west. At that time, we will attack when they are 300 steps away. Before that, I hope that Commander Yang and Commander Mao can play your roles. Lie in ambush on the two sides and shoot from afar. Don't worry about whether you can hit the enemy or not. Just shoot with the fastest speed and immediately retreat. Do you understand? Xiao Feng looked at the two commanders of the Ming army and used an unquestionable tone to give the order. Although they were not affiliated with each other, Yang Jie and Mao Fushou had seen how Xiao Feng had led the Cold Front Company into Willow Town and killed hundreds of Walla cavalry. In the army, the strong were always respected. With the scene just now, Xiao Feng's words naturally had more credibility. Furthermore, he was not asking them to go up and die. Why would they not agree? At that moment, the two of them expressed their agreement and quickly began to make preparations. They had made arrangements in advance. Just as the 2,000 Ming army went to the west of Willow Town, a large number of Walla army appeared. Release the arrows, release the arrows. After releasing the arrows, immediately retreat. When Yang Jie and Mao Fushou saw that the Walla cavalry had charged into the range of the bows, they loudly gave the order. Immediately, arrows rained down from the sky and landed on the Walla cavalry that was charging out of the town. The dense barrage of arrows rained down, and hundreds of Walla cavalry were shot down. They fell from their horses, causing waves of chaos. However, even more cavalry charged out and headed straight for Xiao Feng, who was guarding the front. Xiao Feng, who was also holding the 95 style, had an excited expression on his face. He was the first to raise his gun and shoot, hitting a Walla cavalry that was charging over with a sword. This was like a signal that instantly pulled the attention of all the Cold Front Company soldiers. At that moment, hundreds of guns were fired at the same time. Bullets flew out from the muzzles and flew towards the charging enemy and the war horses that were relatively larger in size. Ah! Do you see, the Ming army here is indeed few in number. Follow me and charge. When he saw that the bows were flying all over the sky, but in reality they were not very accurate and their accuracy was greatly reduced, the leading Wei Gong thought that he had seen through the Ming army. He was immediately overjoyed and urged the army to quickly move forward. Just as the order was given, the second echelon of 1,000 Walla cavalry charged out, and there was a burst of firecrackers in front of them. From afar they could not see the situation in front of them clearly. They could only see streaks of fire that were like meteors flashing by. It was because they could not see the situation in front of them that the Walla cavalry at the back continued to charge forward, one after another, towards hell. The sound of the gunshots traveled very far. Around 15 li behind Wei Gong, they could faintly see the scene of red light flashing in the distance. Luckily this was a plain. If there was a forest in the way, it would be difficult to see the scene in the distance. The Ming army actually came out of the city to fight? Looking at the red sky in front of him, Borromeo quickly made a judgment and guessed that Wei Gong had encountered the Ming army. Based on the time that they set off, he did not think that Wei Gong would be able to reach the capital so quickly. Thus, there could only be one conclusion, and that was that the Ming army took the initiative to come out of the city. They wanted to catch them off guard. In the art of war, there was the saying of taking the enemy by surprise. However, the Walla were mostly cavalry. In a battle on a plain, their advantage was too great. The Ming army did not know this, so it was no wonder that they were defeated. Men, send down the order to speed up and gather with Wei Gong's troops as soon as possible. In order to not let Wei Gong take all the credit, Borromeo, who had always been cautious, was careless for once. This was naturally because the sky was dark, so no one could see what was happening in front of them. However, it was also because of Ing Zong and Shi Heng's repeated defeats, which caused the Walla to be arrogant and think that the Ming army could not withstand a single blow. Under the order, the 20,000 Walla cavalry increased their speed. In a few moments they had traveled 10 li. When they reached here, they could faintly hear the dense gunshots in front of them. They're here, they're here. When Battalion Commander Wu Sheng and his 4 company brothers saw the Walla cavalry approaching from afar, they immediately became excited. Previously, they were worried that the Walla's main force would shrink back because of the unclear situation in front of them. Now, it seemed that there was no need to worry. The excitement of Wu Sheng and Lung Feng was seen by Sun Tong and Ming Jun, who were accompanying them. They were very confused. They couldn't understand. At most, there were only 1,100 people. How could they be so excited and happy when facing 20,000 enemies? Did these people not want to live anymore? Or were they too arrogant and did not put others in their eyes? Under the astonished gazes, Wu Sheng and Leng Feng quickly checked the black firearms in their hands. Then they formed a small semicircle and crawled on both sides of the road to Willow Town. 100 against 20,000, Wu Sheng would not be so arrogant as to fight hand-to-hand with the enemy. They adopted the battle strategy that Yang Qindong taught them. That strategy was to retreat when the enemy advanced, harass when the enemy was stationary, attack when the enemy was tired, and advance when the enemy retreated. In the process of the Walla army's advance, they would give the enemy the most effective damage. At the same time, the enemy would be annoyed and unable to do anything to them. The soldiers of 4th Company were divided into 3 groups by platoon. The first platoon was personally led by Wu Sheng. There were a total of 4 platoons and they were also the strongest. They were responsible for blocking the Walla cavalry's advance. The second platoon was on the left and the third platoon was on the right. They were responsible for blocking the advance of the Walla cavalry. Wu Sheng had just given the 3 platoon leaders their tasks when Sun Tong hurriedly walked over. "Company Commander Wu, what can we do? You are responsible for following my platoon. Retreat as you fight on the road. Create a false impression that we are no match for the Walla cavalry. This will make them bolder and chase after us. That will be a great achievement." Wu Sheng roughly explained the battle plan that he and young Master Yang Qindong had arranged. When Sun Chuanchu heard this military order, he was stunned at first. Then he understood what it meant and said, "Company Commander Wu means that we should pretend to run away?" "Yes, something like that." "What? Is there a problem, Commander Sun?" Wu Sheng thought that this understanding was not wrong. However, one kind of defeat was intentional and the other was genuine. He just did not know how the 1,000 Ming soldiers would perform. Chapter 210. No problem. Hearing that they were just pretending to run away, Sun Tong nodded firmly. If he had to lead 1,000 soldiers to fight against the 20,000 elite Walla cavalry, it would be impossible. But when it came to running away, there was no need to disguise anything. Everyone knew what to do, right? In fact, it was exactly so. When the 20,000 Walla cavalrymen appeared and displayed their majestic and powerful side, the 1,000 Ming soldiers actually displayed their inability to run away vividly. Before Wu Sheng and Sun Tong even gave any orders, the 1,000 Ming soldiers began to collapse. This was not an act, but a genuine fear in their hearts. In the end, what they showed was exactly what Wu Sheng had predicted. It was even more realistic than what he had imagined. And for such an outcome to occur, it didn't seem to be as simple as acting. Instead, he really did run away because he was afraid. The Ming soldiers in front of them were defeated before they even made contact. When the Walla cavalry saw this scene, they burst into laughter. Then they charged forward without any fear. It looked like they wanted to beat the enemy when they were down. The Walla cavalry, who wanted to fight for glory, rushed out with more than 1,000 men. This was exactly what Wu Sheng wanted. He was only leading a company and had limited military strength. In this situation, if the enemy had too many soldiers, he could only retreat in order to ensure that he did not suffer any casualties. But if the enemy only had 1,000 men, he was confident that he could defeat them. Use flag signals to give orders to the 2nd and 3rd platoons. Let them fight according to the previous plan. The first row of warriors will wait for the enemy cavalry to enter our shooting range. Let's kill them. There's no need to hold back. Wu Sheng looked at the dust on the road opposite him and saw more and more enemy cavalry approaching him. He then gave the order to the cold vanguard soldiers. They could not wait, especially when they heard the gunfire behind them. The morale of the cold vanguard soldiers was high. They finally had a chance to perform well in front of the 6th young master. Of course, they did not want to miss this opportunity. As time passed, Wu Sheng's 4th Company, brimming with battle intent, finally came into close contact with Walla's 1,000 cavalrymen. When the distance between the two sides was less than 200 steps, and those with good eyesight could even see the shadows of the other side, Wu Sheng decisively gave the order to open fire. For a moment, the 40-man team of cold vanguard spat out tongues of flame from their firearms. At this time there was no need to aim at all. He only needed to rely on his intuition to shoot at the black shadow in the distance. As the gunshots continued to ring out, sparks streaked across the sky like meteors. One by one, the cavalrymen fell from their horses. Many of them did not understand what had happened even until they died. 80 to 90% of the Walla cavalry in the first 3 rows were wiped out, which allowed the Walla cavalry behind to see the situation in front of them clearly. When a Walla Chiliarch saw that they had lost 20 to 30% of their troops, his eyes widened in anger and he shouted angrily, "Everyone, don't be afraid. This is the Ming army's firearms camp. As long as we can charge in, it's time to show off. Kill." After 200 to 300 of their men were killed, the Vara cavalry did not retreat. Instead, they charged forward, shouting their unique Mongolian language and chant. It was clear that they wanted to use the advantage of the speed of their horses to charge into the Ming army. Then they would start a massacre. The Walla cavalry was very fast and charged forward like a whirlwind. In the dark night, it gave people the feeling that dark clouds were pressing down on the city. If they were facing the Ming army this time, even if the Ming army was several times more powerful than them, they would still have a chance of winning. They would even be able to beat the Ming army until they covered their heads and ran away. Unfortunately, they were facing the Yangtze's new Cold Vanguard army, which was 100 times more powerful than them. Facing an enemy that was dozens of times more powerful than them, they were not afraid at all. Instead, they were excited. Raising the 95 style in his hand, Commander Wu Xing shouted, "Attack!" Not only on the official road but on both sides of the official road, tongues of fire also sprayed out, completely surrounding the Watts cavalry from afar in a fan-shaped formation. Bang bang bang! Under the sounds of gunfire, the pitiful Walla cavalry were like paddy fields swept by a hurricane. Plop 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 plop, they fell to the ground one by one. From afar, the sounds of men and horses being overturned could be heard. The Cold Vanguard never knew what it meant to be soft when facing enemies. They may have a soft side, but that side was only for their family and friends as well as the young Master Yang Chendong that they were loyal to. As for other people, they were no different from animals. Hundreds of tongues of fire were fired, and only 1,000 Walla cavalry corpses were left on the official road. This vanguard army finally paid with their lives for their arrogance. When the child General Borromeo arrived with a large group of men, all he saw was a ground full of corpses and the stench of blood in the air. Report: the Ming army is retreating. There are about 1,000 of them and they are less than 5 miles away from us. The elite Walla army scouts quickly determined the situation of the Ming army from the traces on the ground and reported it to General Borromeo. When he heard that 1,000 of his elite warriors were killed by 1,000 Ming soldiers, Borromeo's eyes flashed with intense anger. He had a vicious side to him and people like him were the most vengeful. Since someone had slapped him, if he did not catch the culprit and punish him 100 or 1,000 times, he would not let it go. Order the army to advance. We must catch up to the Ming army and then kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. In his anger, Borromeo gave out the order to kill. When the Qianhu under him heard this, they immediately got on their horses and galloped forward. The Walla cavalry was determined to kill the Ming army that was 5 miles away. It was as if a vicious wolf had set its eyes on a sheep, opening its bloody mouth. However, it seemed that their teeth were not sharp. Facing the retreating Cold Front 4th Company, not only did they not manage to swallow their prey as they had expected, they even broke a few teeth along the way. It was a great loss. After a few charges, they were beaten back a few times. After losing another 1,000 cavalry, the Walla cavalry had advanced more than 10 miles and was now 5 miles away from Willow Town. At this time, Wu Sheng's 4th Company had already met up with Xiao Feng's 1st Company. The soldiers of the two companies were naturally in high spirits. Tonight's battle could be said to be extremely satisfying. Everyone had obtained a lot of gains. Compared to them, the Ming army was far worse. Especially Sun Per and the 1,000 Ming soldiers that followed the 4th Company. They carried out their mission very well, running all the way, acting very well. No. It should be said that without the 4th Company at the back, they would have already collapsed, or rather, they would have already collapsed. After retreating 5 miles to the west of Willow Town, the 4th Company and the 1st Company met up, and they had more than 3,000 Ming soldiers. However, this strength was not enough to stop the charging Ming army. Borromeo's troops. In other words, the plan did not have any intention of stopping them. Instead, the Ming army started to retreat like the tide, leaving a path to Willow Town. Willow Town. Walla's vanguard general, Nai Gong, ordered his warriors to charge forward and back a few times. After losing soldiers, they finally knew the power of the Ming army that surrounded them. The original 10,000 people quickly became less than 4,000 people. They finally became well-behaved and did not struggle. Instead, they went from attacking to defending, preparing to wait for reinforcements to arrive. Without waiting for too long, Borromeo's troops entered Willow Town from the west. The moment he entered the town, he saw injured vanguard warriors everywhere. Borromeo was in disbelief. Was this still the vanguard army that did not put the heroes of the world in their eyes? This was exactly the same as the great Ming army that was defeated in the Tumu incident. Finally seeing Borromeo, Naigong, a 7-foot man, was so emotional that he almost cried. With a plop, he half knelt in front of Borromeo, praising the strength of the Ming army and his failure to break out of the encirclement. Naigong was a fierce general, and he rarely put other people in his eyes. Even though Borromeo was Yeshen's younger brother like the dead Sai Yenwang, he still did not put them in his eyes. For him to half kneel in front of Borromeo, one could imagine how big of a blow he had suffered, to the point where he could even give up half of his dignity. Is the Ming army really that powerful? After hearing his grandfather's description, Borromeo had a bad feeling in his heart. Along the way he had fought with the Ming army. Along the way, he had advanced triumphantly and had not seen much resistance. However, when he thought about how only his own warriors had died along the way and not a single Ming army corpse, Borromeo felt that something was not right. However, he could not put his finger on it. Logically speaking, with his current military strength, even if the Ming army wanted to play some tricks, what did he have to fear? Not to mention that he had met up with Naigong's troops. Facing the encirclement of 10,000 Ming soldiers, what could they do to him? In the end, it all depended on strength. Without enough strength, even if you used tactics well, what could you do? Since when can seeing a sheep kill a wolf? Borromeo did not know. It was true that the Ming army was a sheep, but there was also a tiger working with them. Although it was only a cub, when it opened its mouth and bared its fangs, it was still very frightening. It could also swallow an adult wolf. Chapter 211. Report. We suddenly discovered a large number of Ming soldiers at the west side of the town. They are blocking our way back. A Walla scout ran to Borromeo and knelt on the ground, reporting everything he saw. Borromeo was still trying to figure out what was wrong when he heard the scout's report. His eyes lit up and he quickly figured out all the problems. But then, his face was filled with disbelief. According to his thoughts, the Ming army wanted to surround him and Naigong's troops and then eat them all. But the report said that the army only had 10,000 people. Did they have the ability to do this? What was going on? Even if the report was wrong and the Ming army came to the capital, how could the Ming army, who had just suffered 2 defeats at the hands of Tumu and Shiheng, have such courage? Borromeo thought and decided to go to the west side of the town to take a look. General Naigong also had a face of disbelief as he followed behind Borromeo to the west side of Willow Town. 50 li away from Willow Town, Walla's rear army was resting under the command of their leader, Yeshen. In front of them were the 2 armies he sent out. This night, Yeshen slept exceptionally well. After seeing the Ming army's main force destroyed, he didn't think that there was anyone who could threaten him. But what Yeshen didn't know was that at this moment, 800 steps away from his tent, Yang Qindong had already arrived. He stood on an inconspicuous small hill and used a night vision telescope to look down at everything in his camp. The layout of the camp is somewhat loose on the outside but tight on the inside. Yang Qindong slowly lowered the binoculars in front of his eyes. A gentle and confident smile appeared on his face. "Young master, should we inform them to move?" The tall Beta Persei, who was more than 8 feet tall, asked in a heavy voice. "Yes, use the radio to inform Tiger's Mane that we can move, hee. Yang Qindong nodded lightly. Now, everything was going according to his plan. This made him feel like he was in control of the world. In fact, for this operation Yang Qindong did pay a lot. At least, he took out a lot of good things from the warehouse. On the surface, the warehouse was a large military warehouse for the country. Not only were there some advanced weapons produced in the country, but there were also some weapons that were ready to be deployed. There were also some cutting-edge weapons that were collected from all over the world for self-research purposes. And now, all of this was under Yang Qindong's control. This time, in order to effectively attack the Walla's army and achieve his goal, he specially mobilized the FGT-203mm towed artillery from the warehouse. The FGT-203mm towed artillery was the largest caliber field artillery developed by China. It was developed by the Northern Industrial Company. This system was mainly used by military-level combat units. It had a long range, great power, and high accuracy. It could be equipped with a variety of special ammunition. It was the backbone of long-range firepower. Although the artillery was dismounted, Its range exceeded that of the same type of artillery in the United States and Russia, and it was given the title of Asia's first artillery. The FGT-203mm towed artillery was very cumbersome, and its mobility was not as good as other artillery. In addition, it was easy to expose the target, and it was slow to retreat after being attacked. It was precisely because of these shortcomings that its development was eventually stopped. There was an FGT-203mm towed cannon in the warehouse, and it was displayed as an antique. This time Yang Chendong took it out. In addition to wanting to review the power of this cannon, he also relied on the fact that the warehouse only needed to place the cannon in one place, and there was no need for it to be moved. Also, this artillery had an effective range of 50 kilometers, and its lethality was very large. It was perfect for him to use in this battle. The FGT-203mm towed artillery was taken out and placed in a hidden place. Yang Chendong didn't forget to bring Hu Mang and Lung Song's first platoon of the second company to the artillery. When they found the artillery, these experienced Lung Feng soldiers widened their eyes. The FGT-203mm towed artillery was very powerful. It could hurt both enemies and oneself. Once such a heavy firearm appeared, Yang Chendong had always been very careful. He brought his most trusted subordinate Tiger's Mane with him so that he could be in charge of using the artillery. After handing the FGT-203mm towed artillery to Tiger's Mane, he did some simple operations and told the other Cold Front soldiers how to fire the artillery. He also told them in detail the exact location of the artillery. After that, Yang Chendong left a long-range radio communicator and arrived outside the Walla army camp. Looking at the sleeping enemy in front of him, he felt that it was time to wake them up. Use the radio to inform Tiger's Mane that we can move now. Let's hope he can hit more accurately, Yang Chendong said as he led the Cold Front soldiers in 2nd Platoon and 3rd Platoon of 2nd Company to retreat. After all, this was a cannon. There was a chance of accidental damage. If they were killed by their own artillery before they could hit the enemy, there would be no way to explain themselves. Beta Persei clumsily used the radio to contact Tiger's Mane. After telling him the 6th young master's intention, Tiger's Mane, who was in a mountain valley about 30 kilometers away, gave the order to fire the artillery with a serious expression. There were 2 FGT-203mm towed cannons in total. Under Tiger Light's command, Lung Feng's brothers, who had systematically and seriously studied artillery knowledge, began to operate the cannons in an orderly manner. They weren't very familiar with it. After the necessary procedures were carefully carried out, a golden artillery shell that could only be carried by an adult was sent into the barrel. Under Tiger's Mane's order, one of the FGT-203mm towed artillery cannons that had its coordinates adjusted by Yang Chendong let out a roar. After a sudden tremble, flames whizzed out of the muzzle and flew straight into the Walla army camp about 30 kilometers away. Most of the Walla soldiers were immersed in their dreams. This time they had gained a lot of benefits. Many of the soldiers' faces were filled with satisfied smiles. But all of this was interrupted by a deafening sound. Boom! A roar like a small earthquake sounded, and then the artillery shell landed in the Walla army camp, producing a huge flame that spread out from the center. The shrapnel of the bomb was like countless meteorites flying in the sky, piercing through one tent after another, producing bursts of wailing and howling. Not far away, Beta Persei and the others looked at the mushroom-like flames. Although they were prepared, they were still stunned. But soon this shock turned into worship, and their eyes fell on Yang Chendong, who was standing in the middle of them. At this time Yang Chendong was smiling. He was happy that he hadn't forgotten about his work. The artillery shell was still very accurate. This was also thanks to the fact that in his previous life, the country found more than a dozen artillery experts to train him for a month to complete a mission. At that time he was so busy that he didn't even have time to sleep. Looking at the results now, he felt that everything was worth it. Inform Tiger's Mane, adjust the target to the left and right, and fire the second shell. Since the coordinates were prepared, Yang Chendong had nothing to be afraid of. He continued to give orders to Beta Persei, asking him to use the radio communicator to inform Tiger's Mane 30 miles away. At this moment, the Walla army camp was already in a mess. Even the soldiers who were usually sleeping were awakened by the loud noise. Some of them, wearing simple pajamas, rushed out of their tents and looked at the mess in front of them. From time to time, they would rub their eyes to make sure that this was not a dream but reality. Just when everyone was still in a daze and wondering what was going on, the second shell fell as scheduled. The landing point was 50 steps to the left of the first shell. With another loud noise, some unlucky soldiers stood in the area of the bombardment. At that moment they successfully fulfilled their childhood dream and flew into the sky. But this was just a flash in the pan. Soon they fell to the ground under the influence of gravity. However, when he landed on the ground, there was not the slightest sign of life. The artillery fire in the dark night was dazzling and eye-catching. Yang Qindong and the others were enjoying everything in front of them as if they were watching fireworks. In contrast, the Walla army camp was already in a mess. Leader Yeshen had already been awakened. He was wearing a cloak, and under the protection of the soldiers, he looked blankly at the balls of fire one after another. His lips were trembling and he seemed to be mumbling something at the moment. Yeshen was indeed stunned by the scene in front of him. He had never seen or even dared to imagine a scene so real in front of him, making him feel like he was in a dream. However, the cries of the soldiers were so real and the smell of blood was so thick. The cruel reality was telling him that everything was so real, and there was not the slightest hint of falsehood in it. "Leader, let's leave this place quickly. It's too dangerous here." A trusted aide watched as the flames that could devour lives fell around them from time to time. He was afraid that the next moment, it would threaten the safety of his master. Thus, he hurriedly reminded his master of the situation. "Wait, it stopped. Just as he instinctively wanted to nod his head and abandon the warriors who supported him, everything suddenly became quiet again. Although there were still fires burning and the screams of the soldiers were incessant, there was no more gunfire. The danger seemed to have gone away. Chapter 212. Report. Just when everyone was still trying to figure out what was going on, just when they were not sure if the wrath of the heavens would descend again, a scout hurried to Yeshen and knelt on the ground. There was a trace of panic in his voice as he said, "Leader, there is a Ming soldier outside the camp. He said he has a letter for you." "Where is he?" When he heard that a Ming soldier dared to come to the camp, Yeshen's eyes narrowed. A boundless killing intent and anger rose from the bottom of his heart. "He is under the control of our brothers." The scout felt his leader's killing intent and did not even dare to raise his head as he answered, "Kill him." When his trusted aides heard that a Ming soldier was under control, they immediately shouted loudly. It was as if killing the messenger would not be enough to quell the anger in their hearts. "Wait a moment." Yeshen waved his hand lightly. "Let's see what is written in the letter first. Since he dared to come and deliver a letter, he must be someone who dared to die. Even if someone like him was killed, it would not be of much benefit to Walla. It was better to see the other party's intentions first and understand his thoughts before speaking." Walla took the letter and opened it in his hand. Immediately, the vigorous and powerful Chinese characters appeared in his eyes. The letter was written by Yang Qindong himself, and the calligraphy he had been practicing for a while finally came in handy. Leader Yeshen Junjian, this lightning was inevitable because of marquee actions. It is because Walla made such a big fuss and went against the harmony of the heavens. However, the heavens are virtuous. Marquis cannot bear to continue causing suffering and is willing to turn weapons of war into gifts of jade and silk. If you are willing, you can leave the city for a while. On the other hand, if the lightning continues, I am afraid that Walla's army will cease to exist. What choice do you have? Please think thrice before you act. Ming Dynasty's loyal Marquis Yang Qindong. There were not many words, but the purpose of the letter was very clear. According to the letter, the fiery light that could easily kill people was caused by Yang Qindong's actions. If he wanted to prevent such things from happening again, it was very simple. He just needed to leave the city for a while and he would know the requirements. Yeshen didn't answer immediately. Instead, he passed the letter to his trusted aides. After they read it, they immediately gave their opinions. Some people said that they couldn't go out. This must be the trick of the loyal Marquis, in order to trick the leader into going out to look for the killing opportunity. Others said that there was no need to be afraid of Liao Ming. Since they wanted to kill people, then they had to be prepared to be killed in return. Once the two sides met, they would not be far from each other. At that time, Walla's elite cavalry would slaughter everything. When Yeshen heard this, his expression changed again and again. When he saw the messy barracks as well as the countless injured subordinates, he finally said fiercely, "This leader wants to see what this loyal Marquis has to say. Men, gather 1,000 elite warriors and go out with this leader to meet him." Bringing 1,000 brothers, this was Yeshen's method of self-protection. He must meet with Yang Qindong. Apart from the fact that he didn't want to be hit by the huge power of the cannon, he also wanted to hear what the loyal Marquis had to say. It was easy to select 1,000 elite cavalry from tens of thousands of soldiers. After a while, they were gathered and followed Yeshen out of the camp. 3 miles away from the camp, Yang Qindong stood on a protruding slope and looked into the distance under the protection of Beta Persei, Qiu V's first guard team and 60 soldiers. Young Master Yang Wu will be fine, right? Beta Persei had a rare look of nervousness. When he thought of Yang Wu, who was sent to deliver the letter, his heart was filled with irritation. Nothing will happen, you have to believe in this young master. Yang Qindong still had a confident look on his face. He believed that since Yeshen could stand out among the Walla generals, he was not a short-sighted person. When 2 armies fought, they would not kill the messenger, not to mention the threats in the letter. As long as they were not reckless people, they would definitely not do anything to Yang Wu who delivered the letter. Of course, there were exceptions to everything. Beta Persei's worry was not without reason. In order to comfort him, Yang Qindong added, if Yang Wu and his brothers were injured by the enemy, then this young master will bury the entire Walla army with them. At that time, no one will be left alive. His voice was so indifferent, without the slightest murderous intent or anger. But from this sentence, Beta Persei could clearly hear Yang Qindong's determination. He thought that for the life of one of his brothers, he would bury the entire Walla army with them. Suddenly he was a little envious of Yang Wu. His own death in exchange for such a spectacular scene, it seemed worth it no matter how he looked at it. This sentence was not only heard by Beta Persei, but also by all the brothers who were protecting Yang Qindong. For some reason at this moment, they just felt a rush of hot blood in their bodies, making it difficult for them to calm down. It was as if they had to do something. In the midst of this restlessness, a group of troops came from not far away. It was not very clear in the night, but based on their instincts, everyone could feel that there should be a large number of people, at least 10 times more than them. Wallace troops had indeed appeared. At this moment, all the restlessness in the hearts of the Lung Feng's troops disappeared. This was the ability of a veteran of hundreds of battles. No matter what kind of emotions they had, once they entered a state of war, they would always be able to recover their body and mind to their best state in the shortest time possible. Young master, they're here. Yang Wu led the way, and after seeing Yang Qindong, he quickly rode over on his horse. In the process of approaching, the Walla army was considered to be well behaved. No one moved recklessly, and there was no sound of horses neighing. It was so quiet that it seemed like they were elites. Very good, thank you for your hard work. Yang Qindong chuckled, and then Beta Persei led a snow-white horse over from the side. Yang Qindong leaped lightly and landed on the horse. Then he moved forward. Young master. Yang Qindong's actions caused the Lung Feng's troops behind him to shout in unison. In response, Yang Qindong reined in his horse and stopped. He turned to the crowd and revealed a bright smile, saying, I believe that with all of you here, this young master will definitely be fine, right? No one answered, but they all nodded in unison. Their uniform movements showed the attitude of these Lung Feng's troops. They swore in their hearts that as long as they were still alive, they would never let the 6th young master's personal safety be threatened in the slightest. Ha ha ha. Seeing how confident the Lung Feng's troops were, Yang Qindong could not help but laugh to the sky. Then he slowly rode forward on his horse and shouted loudly, The Great Ming's loyal Marquis wishes to see Leader Yeshen. Do you dare to meet him? Why wouldn't I dare? A similar shout came from the other side of the night. Then a strong horse leaped out of the troops and came forward. The distance between the two parties was less than 3 li. The place where they met was between the two parties. Then the two stopped 10 steps away from each other. Yeshen leaped out on his horse with a grand aura. Of course, the reason he dared to do so was because he believed that this area was safe. However, he did not know that under the cover of night, the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad had quickly approached and completely included him in the range of being killed at any time. Yang Qindong and Yeshen looked at each other. When he saw that the other party was looking at him seriously, he smiled and said, As expected of the leader of the Walla. Your boldness is admirable. You're too kind. The loyal Marquis is indeed a rising star of the Great Ming Dynasty. You actually dare to meet me at such a close distance. It can be seen that you are also a bold person. Then tell me, what is this so-called heavenly lightning all about? Also, don't try to fool me with some nonsense about ghosts and gods. I have lived for so long and I do not believe in such things. I only believe in one thing, and that is myself and my own strength. Yeshen wanted to gain the upper hand by a show of strength. He had killed his way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Only then did he have his current achievements and position. He did not believe that a scholar of the great Ming Dynasty who was less than 20 years old and only knew how to read books every day would have any knowledge. As long as he could successfully suppress the other party, it would be easy to get the truth. Once he knew the truth, whether to talk or kill would be completely up to him. To Yang Qindong, it sounded like a joke to him that he was the first to come up and threaten him. If he did not want to keep Yes Hen to continue pressuring the great Ming Dynasty and create enough space and time for his own development, he was afraid that there would not be this meeting at all. Instead, he would have directly dealt with Yes Hen. He had his own plan, so he did not touch Yes Hen. But now this person had other ideas. It was ridiculous to think about it. Looking at Yes Hen, who was still pretending to be angry, Yang Qindong shrugged indifferently. Marquis knows how to use divine techniques. If you don't believe me, then it's easy. I can make the thunder reappear in minutes. Do you want to try? She originally thought that she had seen through Yang Qindong's trick, but she didn't expect him to be so calm at this time. Her eyes couldn't help but become a lot colder. Don't try to test this chief's bottom line, or you will regret it. I will regret it, ha ha ha. As if he had heard the biggest joke in the world, Yang Qindong looked up to the sky and roared. Then he suddenly stopped. Then, his right hand turned into a fist and gently pushed forward. This was a signal to Beta Persei behind him to fire. Beta Persei had been watching the sixth young master's every move. Seeing that he had made his move, he immediately used the radio station to call for Tiger's mane. Although he stretched out his hand, the thunder that should have appeared did not immediately appear. Yes Hen was nervous at first, but his face soon relaxed. Let's see. Reality will expose all your lies. Boom. A loud noise came out and landed in the barracks behind Yes Hen. The Walla tent that had just quieted down was once again filled with cries and shouts. Chapter 213. The smile on Yeshen's face froze in an instant. Then it became very ugly. The sky thunder killed his loyal warriors. He glared at Yang Qindong and shouted, "What are you doing? Don't you know that we are still negotiating?" Yang Qindong ignored Yeshen's roar. Instead, he grinned and revealed a sinister smile. Then he switched to his left hand and gestured at the warhorse under Yes Hen. As if to coordinate with this gesture, a bullet suddenly flew out from an unknown place and shot into his strong warhorse. The originally strong horse suddenly neighed in pain and fell to its knees with a plop. The sudden movement of the warhorse caught Yes Hen off guard. He fell from the warhorse without any warning. Because he was quite skilled, he did not get his face covered in dust. He only staggered a little and his body tilted a little, but he quickly returned to his original state. With a push of his right hand and a tap of his left hand, Yes Hen was no longer as unforgiving as before. He became much more obedient. However, the soldiers behind him did not know what happened. When they saw their leader fall from the warhorse, they thought that something bad had happened. Suddenly, 5 strong horses rushed out and leaped straight at him. "Fall all of you." Since he wanted to establish his might, he naturally wouldn't give the other party a chance. Under Yang Qindong's angry roar, the Ghost Shadow Sniper team ambushed behind him took action. The 5 warhorses were locked in an instant. Only half of the way forward, they fell to the ground one by one. With night vision goggles and advanced sniping techniques, Bai Zhua and his team members had complete control of the small battlefield. Above, seeing that 5 of their own warriors had fallen, the other Vala people were still shouting in disbelief. However, they were the first to react quickly. They turned around and gathered their chi in their dantian, shouting loudly, "All of you stop. Without my orders, no one is to act rashly. Otherwise, you will be punished by military law." Yes Hen was really scared. He was frightened by Yang Qindong's gesture. He could not see what the other party did, but his men died one by one. Could it be that he really knew some kind of magic? Yes Hen, who had doubts in his heart, quickly analyzed that Yang Qindong did not mean to kill him. Otherwise, why would he talk so much nonsense? If he pointed at him, wouldn't he die on the ground like the other Walla cavalry? Since he knew that Yang Qindong did not want to kill him, he was calm. First, he stopped his men from acting rashly. Then, when he looked at Yang Qindong, his tone became much gentler. He even asked with a hint of respect, "Tell me, what do you want? I don't think you want to kill me, right?" "That's right." Yang Qindong clapped his hands as if he was praising Yeshen's understanding. However, this slap gave him a fright. He instinctively tensed up his body and prepared to defend himself at any time. It was as if he thought that this slap was some kind of demonic technique. Yang Qindong did not ridicule Yeshen's loss of composure. Instead, he said in a calm tone, "In the eyes of Marquis, your life is the same as the other Walla people's lives. It is not worth a penny more. Therefore Marquis has no need to kill you. This time I asked you to come out to talk to you about the Walla army retreating." Retreating? Yeshen was puzzled. Yes, it's retreating. Of course, if you don't retreat, Marquis also has the ability to kill all of you here, just like in the Timu Castle. Although you have fewer people, you still managed to kill 500,000 soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty. Yang Qindong knew what the other party was suspecting. It was nothing more than the lack of military strength, so he casually gave an example. As soon as he heard about the Battle of the Timu Castle, Yeshen's face showed a proud expression, but after he understood what Yang Qindong meant, his face changed instantly. "Do you think you can be like our Walla warriors and win with fewer people? What? Do you think the effect of the heavenly thunder is still not enough? If that's the case, then Marquis doesn't mind a few more." Yang Qindong saw that Yeshen still wanted to get lucky. His face changed immediately, and then he slowly raised his right hand again. This action made Yeshen's expression change. "Wait, I believe you." Yeshen couldn't help but be nervous. The effect of the heavenly thunder was too powerful. A casual strike could kill hundreds and thousands of people. If such a heavenly thunder struck again, he was worried that Walla's morale would be destroyed. If that was the case, how could they still talk about dominating the Great Ming Dynasty? Yeshen finally became obedient, and Yang Qindong naturally withdrew his right hand. "How is it? Do you agree to retreat?" "I agree. This chief will order the entire army to retreat," Yixian said in a somewhat dispirited manner. This time he had come full of confidence, but he returned in disappointment. If it was anyone else, their expression would not be good. No. Who knew that when Yang Qindong heard that the whole army should retreat, he shook his head. "We have to retreat, but not like this." Marquis remembered correctly. "In the Timu Castle, you should have captured a lot of Ming Dynasty soldiers. Now send them back. If there is one less person, you don't have to go back." "What? Are you threatening me?" When he heard that Yang Qindong wanted all the captives, Yeshen's expression changed. He widened his eyes as if he was going to fight for his life. Yang Qindong, who had already controlled the situation, acted as if he didn't see Yeshen's so-called fierce face. "Marquis is threatening you. What? Are you not convinced? If that's the case, Marquis doesn't mind using the heavenly thunder to destroy you." After that, Marquis will lead the army into Walla. When that time comes, not only will the Great Ming Dynasty's captives be taken back, even the women and children of Walla will become the Great Ming Dynasty's captives. "Do you believe me?" Yang Qindong said without showing any weakness. These words were like thousands of needles piercing Yeshen's heart, making him unable to refute. If it was someone else who said this, he might laugh out loud and give the order to kill them. However, these words came from Yang Qindong's mouth. Thinking back to the various actions just now, he was really worried that the other party would do this. In the face of such a powerful heavenly thunder, could the Walla cavalry really withstand it? While Yeshen was still thinking about how to deal with it, Yang Qindong continued to speak. "Marquis only asked you to return the captives. He didn't ask for the gold and silver that you robbed. This is already extra lenient. Furthermore, in Willow Town dozens of miles away, your vanguard army is surrounded by Marquis. If you return the Great Ming Dynasty's captives, Marquis can also let these people go. This is a fair trade. If you don't agree, then there's no need to talk. Marquis will kill you within 3 breaths." After speaking, Yang Qindong gently raised his left hand. This action clearly meant to kill Yeshen. He had already seen the serious consequences of reaching out his left and right hands, so he didn't dare to test the law. He immediately shouted, "Wait, this is such a big matter. No matter what, this chief has to go back and discuss it with his subordinates first. I'm sorry, before all the Great Ming Dynasty's captives are released, you can't leave here." Yang Qindong shook his head and said with a look that said, "Don't play tricks, it's useless to think about it." "Are you going to take me as a hostage?" Yeshen said very discontentedly when he heard this. It was just that after saying this sentence he didn't speak anymore. The reality was already like this. Wasn't it too late for him to react now? He couldn't leave and he couldn't beat him. Reality forced Yeshen to agree to Yang Qindong's conditions. However, although he agreed, Yeshen was still a little worried. Would Yang Qindong act shamelessly? Therefore, after hesitating for a while, he raised his head and said, "Loyal Marquis, but I don't know if you will let me go if I release the captives. Also, will you release all the besieged warriors in Walla?" Seeing that Yeshen also wanted to make a request, Yang Qindong said indifferently, "What? Do you think that other than believing in Marquis, you have the qualifications to negotiate with Marquis? You. After being said this by Yang Qindong, Yeshen's face changed again and again. It was obvious that he was very angry. Haha, Marquis is joking with you. In fact, with your intelligence you can think about it. If Marquis wanted to kill you, why would he talk nonsense with you? As for the captives of the Great Ming, Marquis can bring his army to kill them after killing all of you. Presumably, Walla doesn't have the strength to stop the Great Ming's army now. However, Marquis didn't do this, which is already a kind of sincerity. As for your people who are besieged in Willow Town, I have to trouble you to send someone to inform them not to try to break out of the encirclement. Tell them to stay here obediently and wait for the results of our negotiation. Naturally, they will be released. During this period, if anyone dares to act rashly, they will only die. Don't blame Marquis for not reminding you. Since he had already said this, Yes Hen had to accept it even if he didn't want to. However, after thinking about it carefully, Yang Qindong didn't seem to have the intention to destroy Walla. Otherwise he could do it now and Yes Hen wouldn't have the strength to fight back. There was no other choice. Yes Hen was forced by Yang Qindong's strength and finally lowered his head. He turned around and shouted to the army behind him. He called a few fast horse scouts and arranged them to inform the brothers in Willow Town not to act rashly. In addition, they were to inform the captives of the Great Ming army to escort them back to the loyal Marquis. After the order was given, the scouts left. Yang Qindong smiled and waved his hand. The first guard captain, Chiu Vi, brought people to deliver wine and food to Yes Hen. Leader Walla, the night is long and there are too many things to do. Why don't we drink while waiting? Yes Hen looked at the wooden table in front of him, as well as the hot food and wine. He was even more surprised in his heart. The loyal Marquis of the Great Ming seemed to have calculated everything and knew that he would compromise. He even prepared wine and food. Well, there was nothing to say. Let's eat first. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.